Welcome in as we have a different show, not your typical deeper dive by any means tonight. And we've got you for an extra couple of minutes to handle the game, the fifth game, technically on the 5-game slate, and then turns into a 4-game slate. So we've got you covered throughout, and we'll bring you right up to live before lock. So nothing's changed when it comes to that main slate, if you will. But this extra game, this fifth game, will tackle for the next 19 minutes or so before that locks. The show brought to you by Jock Market. Jordan in the house producing. Say hello to him. And as you see, the man that you'll be listening to way more than me over the next hour and 8 minutes is Adam, who you can follow on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And before we even look at everything, we have to tell you that our show today is brought to you by our new podcast, Betting You. And you can find out all of the answers to the questions you must know, like who's going to win the Heisman, can Georgia knock off Alabama, which MAC teams should you be putting money on from a future standpoint. You get these questions and more answered every single show, every Wednesday. Episodes available now on pretty much every podcast platform, including Spotify and Apple. All right, brother, we've got a different night for sure as we have this game thrown into the mix that's going to start again at like 6:10, and then we turn into a different show, kind of back to normal. So what the hell's going on? How are you? And how are you dealing with the Cincinnati-Cleveland game now folded into this slate?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm doing good, finishing up lineups now, trying to get these in before lock. But yeah, I mean, it's a different slate on DraftKings. It's, a 5-game slate instead of a 4-gamer. It's a appealing game too, is kind of the thing. Like, you can't just kind of skip it and write it off. Luis Castillo, I think, is in a good spot. The Reds are, as a whole, are in a good spot. So yeah, it just makes the slate entirely different.
Yeah, you mentioned just the game itself, Cincinnati, and they hold on, but now that road favorite there might be appealing for people to take Cleveland in this home spot. We do, though, as we look at every now and again, an odd shopper, of course, everywhere, that you need it for futures to current odds, individual player props that will hit as well. But that total at 9.5, so some runs projected here from both teams. When we look at this game specifically, and even if people are looking at it from a showdown standpoint, let's start with the pitching matchup first and foremost, and then kind of look at it like we would if it's with, I think, comparison to every other game on the slate. So let's look at this until 6:10 as the 5-game slate, right? And then everything kind of shrinks down. So we'll talk about the Reds and Indians first, pitching matchup first for you, Adam, and also with the backdrop of these other games still going on.
Yeah, so I mean, I think where you're really interested from a pitching standpoint is in Luis Castillo. Good matchup against the Indians, one of the weaker offenses in baseball right now. No Bobby Bradley in the lineup for Cleveland either. Takes one of their relatively powerful bats out. Also takes out a guy with a 34% strikeout percentage. But we've seen Castillo for the season. His strikeout numbers are way down from the last couple of years. He's at about 23.5%, whereas last year he was at 30.5%. 2019 he was up between 28 and 29%. But you have seen the strikeout numbers start to tick back up recently. Over his last 5 starts, he has a 30.2% strikeout percentage, which is really good to see. And, again, it's a good matchup. So I think that he is one of the stronger pitching options on DraftKings. Right now, we have him projected for only 16% ownership, getting less than Giolito, getting less than Peralta, getting a lot less than Musgrove. So I do really like going to Castillo in tournaments on DraftKings because I think it is a good spot. I think his ceiling is pretty much just as high as anyone else's, and he's not really getting the ownership.
You mentioned the K's, and I did see him sitting at 6.5 here. Is it enough for you to be interested in the over? And then from a DFS standpoint, paying out, I would imagine. I mean, if you can get into that 7 to 9K range, I don't know how big of an ask that may be for Castillo, but just banking off what you mentioned as far as it being on an uptick, at least 7, is that doable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably around where it should be. Like, it's if anything, it's probably a little bit high in terms of, like being favored to get at least 6.5. I think it's maybe a little bit higher than it should be, but it's certainly in his range of outcomes. And that's why I like him for DFS. You have seen the strikeout numbers tick up. You do have a pretty good matchup here against Cleveland. So I wouldn't be betting on him going over 6.5, but from a DFS standpoint at low ownership, I still like to play.
Yeah, and that's where I was looking at from the salary here. I imagine that's a big deterrent for people. But look, on our top pitchers tool, and we'll use our top pitchers tool, our top stacks tool. What's free to you today for what you should be taking full advantage of are ownership projections. So that alone combined with the stack and top pitcher tool. But speaking specifically to Castillo, sitting at 10K, yet the fourth highest pitcher to be in that top 2 range, under-owned, if you will. So some leverage available. And I imagine that's simply because people don't want to pay up for him.
Yeah, and I think he projects a little bit lower than the other top-end pitchers in terms of median projection, but that's not a huge concern when the ownership's as low as it is and when he still has that really high ceiling. So I think that's why the ownership is lower. He's just not his median projection is just not quite as high. And then you also have, Joe Musgrove taking up one of the pitcher spots in almost every lineup. But I do like the fact that he's just getting less ownership than Giolito and Peralta. And then also one other added thing here is that there are weather concerns for the Milwaukee game. So if we get, to 7:30 and that game gets taken off the board by rain, you've already missed out on Castillo. So you're just gonna end up moving a ton of that to Lucas Giolito because him and Musgrove are going to be pretty much the only options left. So I think that's another reason why Castillo is interesting in tournaments. If that game gets rained out, the Milwaukee game, you're going to want, I would think, to kind of have exposure split between Giolito and Castillo as opposed to just jamming it all on Giolito.
Yeah, and I know we're going to bounce around and hit that game in San Diego by all means, but we do have a guy, as you mentioned, he's over 0.75% owned on this slate. Now, it's a 5-game turn to 4-game slate, so it's not like we're dealing with 20 teams out there tonight. But how do you approach that when you see somebody so dominant on an ownership slate where we don't have many other alternatives or pivots, where it may be you kind of ride with that at least for one slot, and then you get creative in tournaments working that P2?
Yeah, in the crunch that I did before the show, I'm updating it now, but I was getting right around the field on Musgrove. I think I had 80% on DraftKings, and it kind of I'm okay with that. I mean, it's such a good spot against Miami. Yeah, he does have his own concerns, and we'll talk about those when we get to that game, but it's just a cheaper price point on him, and it just makes, building lineups really easy. So I was getting pretty much around the field on Musgrove.
I know that you're building the DK now, and FanDuel has that later slate by all means. But I am curious, just kind of looking at. Well, we'll get to that later. I want to focus on what we're doing here now on this 5-game slate. So, all right, I imagine that it's way too much of a risk to wait anything unless it's a long shot play at a tournament for Cleveland, from a pitching standpoint.
Yeah, Sam Hank is. I still can't pronounce that name. It's just
me neither. Really that's why I was hoping. That's why I didn't lead in with his name.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just cannot say it. But yeah, he's not likely to go deep into this game. Looking back at his recent games, he pitched he last pitched an inning on August 4th through 19 pitches, through 17 pitches on August 3rd. If you go back to July 7th, he went 4 1/3 through 86 pitches. My assumption, though, is that you're probably getting something like 2-3 innings from him. So not enough where you're looking to get him, especially at a $7,100 salary. Really no way to get there, I don't think.
All right, so let's look at the bats here now, and especially as we're starting to look at this in comparison to everybody else here. So the stack, at least, and again, feel free to use these tools, $29.95 a week for Awesemo Plus, so you don't have to wait each day that something new is free. The ownership is free, but then we also, looking at our top stacks, Cincinnati becomes appealing clearly because compared to the White Sox and at least the Yankees, the ownership is not there. Even Milwaukee, and you mentioned that game as far as weather concerns. So just jumping out, yes, the White Sox are going to be similarly owned and provide you a better shot when we get to them, at least according to Alex's top stacks tool. But I don't hate the leverage at all for Cincinnati tonight, especially on this short slate.
Oh, me neither. I think Cincinnati looks really good here. Like you said, just not getting as much ownership as the Yankees or even the White Sox. They have the third highest top stack percentage at 17.8%, which is higher than their 13.5 aggregate ownership. And normally you don't really like targeting bullpen games all that much because you're just getting different looks throughout the game. But with this being only a 5-game slate and there being good pitching on the slate, it still sets up as one of the more appealing spots, because when you start to talk about these other ones, it's at the, you have your aces, but then even kind of the mid-tier of guys, Jameson Taillon's not terrible. Carlos Hernandez doesn't seem to be terrible. Zach Thompson's not terrible. So it's kind of like every or most matchups today, you have kind of some question marks about it. So it makes it more appealing, I think, or I'm a little bit more willing to take on the risk of going up against the bullpen.
Is there any, and look, it's not like they're dead by any means. I mean, Cleveland does have more than a Minnesota, Chicago, and Miami chance of breaking this slate tonight. But, much like what we see with these bottom projected stacks, they're not as heavily owned, except for Cleveland because of the cost, I imagine. And they're kind of roughly around Kansas City as far as ownership. Point being, which is, maybe that is too much for you to even take a risk on at their ownership, to where maybe if there was a little bit like 6 or 6.5, it'd be a little bit more of an appealing as a long shot stack in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm not really getting to Cleveland just because, like you said, they're really cheap, and so they're showing up in lineups probably more than they should be. We have them projected to be overowned. I would just rather be allocating, even though teams like Cincinnati are more popular than Cleveland, they also just have a much, much better chance of success. So I'd rather be, just making more lineups that go to teams like that than going to Cleveland, who is projected to be overowned just because they are pretty inexpensive. The whole lineup pretty much outside of Reyes, Ramirez, and Rosario is essentially min salary on DraftKings, but still a tough matchup against Castillo. Just doesn't really look that appealing given the ownership.
All right, I got to give you a shout here. Mac Wall put me on blast saying that I was first place for a lot of that game last night in that Chi-Town Showdown. And I had to give you props, man, because between working with me, doing stuff on, and then the Slack that we'll do, like, you must be sick and fucking tired of me by now, because I'm taking full advantage of access to you. So I got to give you any success that I had in that tournament last night. I got to give up. Now, I can't give you money yet until I start winning big money. Are you cool with that? It's like an agent fee. Until I start making big money, it's not worth your time for these scrap kickbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, based on how my teams did yesterday, I don't think I deserve any credit for anybody winning.
Well, here's the thing, too. I felt kind of bad because I wake up and I see where I am, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm like the student where it's like, finally, I learned what the teacher's been trying to tell me over the last, 6 months we've been working together. And then I see your tweet, and I'm like, ooh, bad timing by me.
Yeah. Rough weekend for me, but, it happens.
I thought you were red hot. What happened?
Yeah, I was. I might not be anymore.
Okay, well, look, we're only going to chalk that up to a bump in the road. It's like a speed bump. When you're driving 45 and that thing pops out of nowhere, you look around, you think, all right, my suspension is still intact. I didn't ruin anything with the car. Let me ramp it right back up to 45. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, get back to it today,
Exactly right, man. All right, let's look at any bats, individual bats, before we look at the 8 o'clock starts and kind of move from Cincinnati and Cleveland. And look, we're giving you as much as we can here. We ask very little in return. Make sure you hit that like button as more and more people are popping in, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you're not late for stuff. So any one-offs, I know Cincinnati has been the topic here, especially from a stack standpoint. So Cincinnati would be the more obvious, but maybe maneuvering around that ownership with 1 or 2 bats for Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati's, I think, where you're really looking. Nick Castellanos is still one of the most mispriced guys on DraftKings. I think he's a pretty easy cash play. He's going to be really popular in tournaments, but as long as the rest of your lineup's not too popular, you can still go there. So he looks really good. I think Jonathan India is one of the top second base plays on the slate. Of course, Winker and Votto are very good. They're also very, very expensive. So I think that the cheap Cincinnati bats probably pick up a little bit more ownership. Castellanos in particular is going to get a ton. But if you're stacking Cincinnati and getting to guys like Winker and Votto, I think that's one way you can at least be a little bit different within that stack.
So overall, this game is more of a nuisance than it is, you think, going to help you out in tournaments tonight?
No, I think Cincinnati's going to be one of the highest owned teams.
Okay, there we go. Clarification. I love it. See, I haven't learned everything. All right, so now let's move on. And again, we'll keep in context here as this is not locked quite yet. So you can take full advantage of the next couple of minutes of reworking anything you hear from Adam. So let's move on now to our next game. And this is the one that we have weather concerns. Clearly, we have that total in Chicago at 9. Milwaukee is clearly a heavy road favorite here. So looking at the pitching matchup first, and I guess we have to keep everything in somewhat context of this could rain out tonight.
Yeah, I think this game's really risky because not only is it apparently supposed to be raining when the game starts and then rain for a while, this is also the first game of a 4-game series between these two teams. So they're going to have ample time to make this up if they don't feel like waiting it out. The way I'm approaching it right now, obviously on FanDuel, you have 2 hours to wait for news. The way I'm approaching it on DraftKings is I went ahead and included it in my lineups, and then I'll just be ready to late swap later if I need to. But that with it only being a 5-game slate, I didn't want to just prematurely write it off either.
No, that definitely makes sense. So is it worth it? And this is just not every single lineup, but I am curious if people are mass entering, and yes, this is selfish for me as well, but I'm sure that there's somebody else out there who's thinking this. Is it worth it to run a couple of crunches and just taking these two teams off the board entirely to get what you have and running some lineups in the event that this thing does get... Now, look, if it's canceled, then you're going to have to do mass change as is for whatever you're getting to with this game. But I'm curious if it's worth running a bunch of crunches without either of these teams, including the pitchers here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I kind of had done it before the show, just in case we got news like, right now that it was rained out, I could just put in that version. But, basically talking FanDuel now, like, I think you're going to have enough time to, like, I think you'll have a better idea, coming up 7:30, what to do with that.
You're right. This is more for DraftKings. Absolutely. Because now you're locked in, right, in 3 minutes. So if you're still crunching and you're still racing and you wanted to go one more time and you haven't done that. And that's why I was just bringing it up, because it's not like you're not going to get solid stacks, especially the Cincinnati one that we just mentioned. So you're not shit out of luck by any means of if you take these top two teams off the board, not even to say that they are. Clearly not with our top stacks tool, but just some sort of maneuverability. All right, so let's look at the individuals here as far as the stacks, right? We're going from pitchers to stacks here. And again, we'll keep this in the back of our minds that weather could have an impact. Milwaukee is super high owned, and at the second highest owned stack on the slate, Adam, they are only the fourth highest projected stack. So you're going to deal with a lot of ownership if you're running with Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason I'm just getting to more Cincinnati, more Yankees, more White Sox, just because the Brewers are picking up a lot of ownership. They're a really cheap team, but I would just rather go to these other ones because I don't think Alec Mills is a terrible pitcher either. There's also, the risk of weather. So I'm not getting to a whole lot of Milwaukee.
All right, so just curious, how much are you like crunching right now? Do you need me to kill like 20 seconds?
Yeah, if you could just like kill the next minute.
That's fine, because I'm always curious, man. I'm not running anything until the 8 o'clock FanDuel slate, which again I'll probably butcher, but at least I'm giving myself some time. I'm nowhere near good enough to do anything like just crunch and apply and crunch away on a spreadsheet in 90 seconds and still do the show. So I did see you kind of looking, and I knew that feel of it. So I have no problem filibustering by any means. It's what we do, right? You have a mic in front of you. You should be able to talk, should be able to hold a conversation. But I will say, as far as just it's looking at the weather itself, I'm staying away from it. And even from a betting standpoint, where if I can kind of maneuver here, I wouldn't even touch this thing. The one that I did like a lot, and we're going to talk about this coming up following this Brewers Cubs game, is the Yankees Royals under. That still sits at 10, and you can get great value going under 10, especially because the wind is blowing from home plate out to left field, and everybody's going to jump on this balls flying. All right, I got 10 seconds until lock. There's no way. Are you good?
Yeah, I should be good.
Okay. If you need another minute, just let me know, man. I've got NFL futures in front of me.
No, we're good. I got my lineups in. Thank you.
Yeah, you're fine, man. Thank you. You're the one here providing all the information. So least we can do is give you a breath, right? We should have like a 30-second Awesemo commercial or something we could run if anybody needs 30 seconds to just adjust something, a late scratch, whatever it may be. Jordan can fire it up and remind you about, our 2 new YouTube channels, whatever it may be, right? Something to just kill 30 seconds to give you a break on this.
Yeah, I have no idea how the live before lock guys do it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've seen Lindquist get pretty angry to where people thought he was angry at Jordan.
Yeah, I've gotten the DMs from him like that he didn't get his lineups in.
All right, let's go back here. Still on this second game, technically, and you mentioned Milwaukee in comparison to Cincinnati. So before we look at any individual bats, I mean, the Cubs I just don't know how much it's worth it in a game that already has a cloud, no pun intended here, right, hanging over it with the concerns of weather. They're projected to be the second worst stack on the board. And even as cheap as they are, people aren't taking the bait and owning them. So if you wanted to be like full on contrarian and say, not only is this game going to go on, but the Cubs are going to break the slate, then sure. But I don't know if it's worth the risk at all.
Yeah, pretty tough spot, going up against arguably the best pitcher on the slate in Freddie Peralta. The hitting conditions are supposed to be good if this game plays. The wind is supposed to be blowing out a bit, so you could make that argument for the Cubs, but still a really, really tough spot. Freddie Peralta does pretty much everything well, with the exception of he walks too many guys, but it's not like walks help you really win tournaments anyway. He's only allowed 0.8 home runs per 9 this year, 3.68 xFIP, 34% strikeout percentage. Really, really tough spot for the Cubs. They, have the second lowest top stack percentage on the slate. Their ownership's about where it should be. So no, there's no real argument for me to get to the Cubs. I don't think I got to much at all on DraftKings.
And it's probably one of the questions where it's like the two aren't connected here, but can we stay away from the Cubs as a stack and maybe take a little more risk with Mills as far as a P2?
Yeah, I didn't get to much of him either. Even if you assume the weather is okay, I just didn't really find it that necessary. Like there's still a lot of value bats on this slate because on FanDuel, hitter pricing is just really, really cheap, and you're not going to Alec Mills as your one pitcher anyway. But even on DraftKings, like on the 5-gamer, you had Castellanos. Even on the 4-gamer, you're going to have these White Sox bats like Luis Robert and Jimenez and Goodwin that are pretty cheap. So I still didn't find it that difficult to not have to pay all the way down to someone like Alec Mills.
All right. Now, as far as anybody, now, again, we're looking at this here with the night slate here. So we've taken away the 5th game of this, and now we're down to the 4 here. So just looking at where we are, moving forward, we've got this in kind of comparison, I should say, without Cincinnati and Cleveland in there moving forward tonight. So with that said, as far as any individual bats with, again, the rest of this slate in the backdrop, is it going to be just more Milwaukee and kind of working Milwaukee, or can you get to a Chicago bat, at least 1 or 2 tonight, even in a mini stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ian Happ at 3,400, Rafael Ortega at 2,800. I don't mind those guys just as, lower owned value options. They're certainly going to get a lot less ownership than, for example, the outfielders on the White Sox that I mentioned. So I don't mind that, but it's certainly not anything I want to build my night around.
Now, on the flip side, it would be Milwaukee just kind of getting around a stack here, right? And working maybe 2 or individual or maybe 2 even 3-man stacks.
Yeah, I think getting to smaller, like secondary stacks from Milwaukee is a little bit more appealing to me, given the fact that they are projected to be overowned. I'm more interested in getting, some lower owned stacks and then mixing Milwaukee in with them. The problem, though, is like the stacks that I want that I'm mostly going to, like, for example, the Yankees and the White Sox, even though they're projected to be underowned, they're still getting a lot of ownership. So if you combine like a Yankee stack or a White Sox stack with the Brewers, you have a ton of total ownership going to that lineup. So that's something else that kind of drives me away from Milwaukee.
So just looking now on that FanDuel slate, because we have everything starting just under 2 hours from now. So we have the benefit clearly of foresight. The ownership for Musgrove is going to be similar right now. The numbers are going to be a little different because the slate and the tournaments are different, but he's over 50% owned in that one pitcher slot. And Peralta, 22, nearly 23% on a normal slate is going to be decent to high owned, but it's almost like a breath of like a break in that standpoint because you're less than half removed from Musgrove. So just back to Peralta for a second from a FanDuel perspective, especially in tournaments or maybe even in a pivot with cash, I don't know, is how appealing is he knowing that he's also the most expensive pitcher on the slate?
I think he's appealing in FanDuel tournaments. I wouldn't be getting away from Musgrove in cash at 9K, but Peralta, does get about half the ownership of Musgrove. He's a better pitcher. I mean, again, we'll get into Musgrove's recent issues when we get to that game, but Musgrove, the most appealing thing about Musgrove is the matchup. He does have, questions about what his stuff is at the moment. Peralta, far and away the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. We saw him throw 96 pitches in his last start, which was notable because Milwaukee had kind of limited him in the two previous starts to 51 and 68 pitches because they're trying to keep his innings workload down. But it seems like now he's back to just being allowed to go, 6-7 innings like normal. And so he gives you a really, really high ceiling, and it's only a $1,200 price difference. There's a lot of really cheap bats on FanDuel. So I don't really think the price is much of a deterrent. I do like pivoting to Peralta in tournaments and getting away from Musgrove.
All right. So you mentioned that you were getting to a lot of the Yankees, especially in comparison to that game that we're expecting a lot of rain here. So let's move now to the Royals hosting the Yankees. And this one, again, a lot of projected runs tonight across the board, as this one was at 10. Again, Odd Shopper, the best place and only place to go to get the most updated for everything. So looking now at this Royals game here, and I guess we'll start with a pitching matchup specifically and kind of looking at where we had both projected. And let me go back to DraftKings and get off that. So I don't know if Hernandez becomes any bit of an appealing play. The ownership is super low, but he does have a lot of value. I'm not sure if you're working either of these pitchers that are low cost, at least compared to the rest of the guys on this slate.
Yeah, I'm interested in both of these guys at relatively low ownership and a cheap salary. Like on FanDuel, it's not really necessary. Like you can make a case for Jameson Taillon at 3%, basically as a pivot away from Musgrove and larger field stuff. But on the 4-game DraftKings slate, I think is where they're going to be more interesting as an SP2, because Taillon's not great, but he does have a 24% strikeout percentage this season. Kansas City doesn't have a particularly good lineup. Taillon's biggest issue has been left-handed power, and there's just kind of none of that in the Royals lineup. Nicky Lopez has virtually no power. Carlos Santana has a 160 ISO against right-handed pitching since last year. Benintendi's at 139. Ryan O'Hearn is at 169. Those are the only lefties in the lineup. So it's not a really scary spot. And then, the righties, Taillon's been very good against this year. So the weather conditions aren't great for pitching. It's hot and humid in Kansas City. The wind's blowing out. And I think that's one reason why this total is so high. But just from a tournament perspective, I think Taillon is kind of interesting. And then on the other side with Carlos Hernandez, yeah, the Yankees are good, but they also strike out a lot. And this is a pretty watered down Yankees lineup today. Brett Gardner is leading off like it's like 2007 or something. I don't know why he's up there, but not a good hitter leading off. You have Andrew Velasquez, Tyler Wade, and Higashioka rounding out the lineup. No Anthony Rizzo, of course. And no Rougned Odor. So it's still a dangerous lineup, but it's not as dangerous as normal. Carlos Hernandez has put up really big strikeout numbers this year at about 27%. I think that regresses as we go forward because, for one, that's like 4 points higher than his AAA strikeout percentage this year. And also it's a lot higher than his major league strikeout percentage last year. So I do think the strikeouts come down. Plus, he's also made 12 relief appearances compared to 4 starts this year. Typically, when you go from the bullpen to the starting rotation, your numbers are going to get worse as well. So I think they come down, but he does have good stuff. The guy throws almost 100 miles an hour. He's 6,200. The Yankees are getting ownership. So if Hernandez pitches well and you have him, you're leapfrogging a lot of the field. I think it's a very risky play, but I don't mind getting to him in tournaments. I'm
telling you, man, you lay out 2 great reasons why both pitchers are appealing. And I just feel so much better about my under 10 wager tonight, because I think the general feel is that, the Yankees, these big bats and the weather. And it's like, no. When you start to look at the specifics, which you perfectly laid out, my friend, I feel better, especially since it was juiced to the over.
Yeah. And even from like a DFS standpoint for me, I know prior to our show, one of my main 3 lineups was a Yankee stack. I ended up not getting to that when I did my last my last run through, and I'm not really upset about it because, again, I realize they have a high ceiling here, but I don't like the lineup, and I don't think Hernandez is bad.
Yeah, and looking at the stack itself, right? The Yankees are the second highest projected stack, but they are the most owned, and a lot of it. I mean, look, they're tied with the Royals for the cheapest, right? Because you mentioned their lineup tonight, so everybody's going to jump on the matchup. Everybody's going to jump on the conditions, and everybody's going to jump on the price. And those 3 seem to add up to an easy fade. Maybe not stay completely away, but way more of a fade than not.
Yeah. I actually just pulled up. I didn't even know how much of this game I'd gotten on the DraftKings main slate. I have 26% Carlos Hernandez in the large field tournament. So
That's over the field, right?
Yeah, by a bit. Yeah. So assuming I end up there and don't, late swap later.
You said 26%?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're 23 or 22.5% over the field.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that goes well.
It's going to look beautiful when Hernandez is a top 2, and this is like a 3-run total, and we can both celebrate. And I don't have to worry about you throwing XK out like I did this morning. So
yeah,
it's going to work out by all means. Now, as far as the Yankees are concerned, and this is where I'm always curious to see how your mind works to kind of get around this, especially because we do have a couple of guys, if it's Castillo and Peralta, for example, where you're paying up on the slate, the 2 most expensive guys for pitching. So now the Yankees aren't appealing as a stack, but there are some super cheap guys, super cheap bats on this team. One-offs at all jump out?
Yeah, I mean, Brett Gardner leading off at 2,500 for a team with a 5.5 or higher than a 5.5 implied run total. That's still a spot you can get to. I would assume he's going to get a little bit less ownership than guys on the White Sox are going to get. I mean, the issue, of course, is that Brett Gardner sucks, but he's still going to get those at bats in favorable hitting conditions. So I think there's some value there. Looking to the bottom of the lineup, I mean, if you end up going to like a low-owned $2,300 Tyler Wade, it's not the end of the world, but it's just not really a spot where you're going to feel great either. It's more so just, trying to get away from the field a little bit in tournaments while also saving money.
So again, we're looking at pretty high implied run totals. And I mentioned how cheap the Yankees are. Same scenario here with the Royals, except they don't have anywhere near the expectations of breaking this slate. So I don't know if that's anywhere near enough. Now, the trade-off, of course, is that there is I take that back, a third less ownership for the Royals. So maybe there's an outside play there, but it just seems like this is just a cheap way around paying up for pitching and rolling with either the Royals or the Yankees.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, Kansas City's getting about the ownership they deserve. They have an 8% chance of being the top stack. They're getting about 7.5% ownership. They have the 3rd highest top value percentage because they are so inexpensive. So I think it's an okay spot. The hitting conditions are good. Jameson Taillon has had home run issues this year with 1.4 home runs per 9, 4.56 xFIP. There's certainly a path to Kansas City having success. But again, the issue that you run into, and that really keeps me from liking them too much, is that there's just not really left-handed power in this lineup. I think Santana and Benintendi are reasonable options, but I would like this team a lot more if they had, at least 1 or 2 like legitimate left-handed power bets.
So I am curious, just because I go back and look at the difference in FanDuel with the stack percentage and also the ownership. The Yankees have a little more appeal on FanDuel than they do on DraftKings, especially in comparison to ownership with both the White Sox and Brewers, who are both more owned. So does that change anything on FanDuel now, where you can actually apply some leverage to the Yankees because of how high owned both the White Sox and Brewers are?
Yeah, I think I would get a lot more Yankees on FanDuel than I did on the 5-game slate on DraftKings, because for one, on DraftKings, you had the White Sox not really being over-owned either. So I got to a lot of them, but then also you had Cincinnati getting a lot of my exposure. On the FanDuel slate, you don't have the Cincinnati game, and the White Sox are projected for a ton of ownership, where you do have the Yankees coming in as the 3rd highest owned stack. So I think I would get to the Yankees a lot more on the 4-game FanDuel slate than I did on the 5-game DraftKings.
All right, we'll keep it going here. Our next couple of games, Minnesota, Padres. We'll get some home run picks, maybe go back to a prop or two, especially as we hit Musgrove. But a reminder here, Jock Market is sponsoring the show. So if you haven't heard, fantasy sports have now turned into the stock exchange. So don't wait until the end of the game, the end of the night, the end of the tournament to make money. You can do it throughout. You just have the IPO at the start, everything for baseball now, golf as well. The NFL is just about to hit here. So we'll have you covered across the board once the NBA returns as well. And just use that IPO. You can buy, you can sell, and even hold during the game based on everything that you're feeling. It's like, hey, you're watching the game, so you want to go along with it and make money off of your gut as well. Use our promo code Awesemo. It's the same, right? AWESEMO for up to a $50 bonus for your first deposit. And again, enjoy, have fun. Not here yet, but we are definitely awaiting it. Like no House Advantage hitting PA. We're definitely waiting for that to pop off in PA here for Jock Market, but definitely take full advantage of our promo code Awesemo. All right, let's move to Minnesota. This is another one. We have a lot of runs tonight. I think the only one we have is the Musgrove game, where even the Marlins, and as bad as they are, could not muster up another half run. But before that, we've got the Minnesota, this game here, as everybody's on the White Sox for multiple reasons, from ownership. Let's start at least from a pitching standpoint. And you mentioned as far as earlier in the night, just kind of looking this on DK, but I wonder if anything changes on your approach tonight with either pitcher on FanDuel.
Talking about Giolito?
Yes. And maybe, well, I imagine Burrows is not going to be a play on FanDuel, but yeah, more so with Giolito.
Yeah, Giolito, I think, is appealing. He's only 9,300. He's projected to be the third highest owned pitcher behind Musgrove and Peralta. He's not as good as Peralta, I think, and his matchup isn't quite as good as Musgrove's. But I do actually like Giolito here. I really like the lineup that he's going up against. Instead of having Josh Donaldson and Mitch Garver, who are in the projected lineup. Instead, you have Jake Cave, Ryan Jeffers. And I think that's important because Mitch Garver has struck out like 37% of the time against right-handed pitching since last year, which obviously is nice, but he's also an above average hitter in terms of production, whereas Ryan Jeffers still strikes out like 32% of the time and isn't as good a hitter as Garver. So that's an upgrade for Giolito, I think. And then the big one is that you take Josh Donaldson, who only has an 18.5% strikeout percentage. You turn that into Jake Cave, who's at 30%, again, right-handed pitching since last year. It gives you this lineup that really has a lot of strikeouts. Like, they can do damage. They still have guys that can hit, but there's really a lot of strikeouts here, basically with the exception. Kepler doesn't strike out much. Polanco, Arraez, and Simmons are difficult to strike out. But every other hitter in this lineup, Brent Rooker's at 27% so far in the majors. Larnach, Jeffers, Cave, Sano, all 30+% strikeout. So I think the ceiling is really, really, really high for Giolito here, even though the Twins aren't as bad in offense as, say, Miami.
Yeah, and I guess if we're looking at it from a DK standpoint, Burrows probably not anything. We'll just move on, right?
Yeah, I'm not anticipating him going deep into the game. I think Charlie Barnes is expected to be the primary guy out of the bullpen. He's not any good either, though. He's thrown 8 2/3 innings in 2 games in the majors so far. But even at AAA in 13 starts this year, he only struck out 19.5% of hitters, 4.25 FIP. Just not anything special about him. So not looking to either pitcher.
All right, so let's move out to the bats here. And again, just looking at what we have, the ownership projections free for you tonight, heading into lock, which is going to come your way in 30 minutes. And our top stacks, which we're constantly using, as well as top pitchers tool, which we just referenced. So now here, and I'm looking on the FanDuel just because of tonight. So you tell me, where you want to start, if it's DK or just looking at this from a FanDuel perspective on this game specifically. Minnesota is going to be kind of there at the bottom. And then on the flip side, you've got the White Sox, which are right there at the top. So again, you're dealing with super ownership with Chicago, and probably a little bit more of a long shot of Minnesota, although you do have pretty good leverage how low owned they are.
Yeah, I do like the little bit of ownership in on Minnesota. It, to me, makes it look a little bit more appealing than, say, the Cubs, Miami, because I think they do have just a little bit better lineup than those guys or than those teams. They're not getting the ownership. They're getting less ownership than the Cubs. They're getting less than Kansas City. So I think if I'm going away from like the actual good offenses, Minnesota would be the first one I get to, because, again, it's a team that isn't very good, but they do at least have some power. Kepler, has power. Rooker has power. Polanco's fine. Sano, when he hits it, it goes really far. Trevor Larnach's been okay since coming up, and he's one of the top hitting prospects in baseball. So I do think that Minnesota's at least talented enough where, like, if Giolito is not on top of his game, they can take advantage. Whereas, honestly, like with Miami, Joe Musgrove can be like 80% of himself, and he's probably still better than Miami.
Yeah, that's going to be a big difference maker by all means. Now, we might have a Venmo alert here where instead of playing this out on the chat, you might as well just ship your money over to Adam. Our buddy Hip Hop Studies. Yes, I got a feeling Burrow will have his night tonight.
I mean, he could be good for like an inning or two, I guess.
Yes, but it is okay. I guess it's not a total red line fade for you. Who was our buddy the other that you were that did not play out? It was not his night.
Manning.
Manning, Matt Manning, right?
Yeah. No, but I mean, Burrow's, the thing with Burrow's, like, he's just not stretched out. He threw 13 pitches last time out. He threw 45 before that. You go back to July 28th, he threw 63. But the reports are that Barnes is supposed to be the primary pitcher. So I'm guessing you get that 1 or 2 in game from Burrows.
Okay, so White Sox are a super heavy favorite, and that total sits at 10. Well, if you could buy the White Sox down to a 1 run and have some fun with that, there's definitely some maneuverability there. But let's look at just bats, even if it's mini stacks to kind of get around where if you're running something, and even if it's like a 4-3 in FanDuel, where you could work that 3 with the White Sox. So how are you looking at getting around from a bat standpoint with Chicago? I mean, they were just red hot last night. So I don't know if there's the cool down factor, or if you're looking to ride that streak and think, all right, instead of just working with a near 30% ownership on this FanDuel slate, at least, let me start working maybe mini stacks, even if it's a 3, as much as a mini as that could be.
Yeah, I mean, the ownership is the issue, and looking individually, pretty much everybody's getting it on FanDuel. Like Tim Anderson, Jimenez, Moncada, Abreu are all 30+%. Luis Roberts at 28.5. Hernandez is at 27. Goodwin's at 21.5. Then you get to Lurie Garcia at 12, and then Sebi Zavala, but there's really no reason to play Sebi Zavala on FanDuel since you don't need to play a catcher. So it's really tough to differentiate within the White Sox lineup because they're just all getting ownership, and they really all should. I mean, the pricing here is pretty bad. 2K minimum for Luis Robert, returning from the injured list, one of the best hitting prospects in baseball, should never be minimum salary. He's too cheap on DraftKings too, but at least there, he's not minimum like he is on FanDuel. Yohan Moncada has struggled over the last, 2 seasons, but 2,800 is a really favorable price tag for him. You get Jimenez only 3,100. So, I mean, I think these guys are, even, Abreu and Anderson are cheap on FanDuel, whereas they're like 6K on DraftKings. So I think that getting to the White Sox is still a good spot to be in, but it's going to be more so mixing them in with lower owned stacks. If I'm running like a 4-3 on FanDuel, getting to like an Abreu 1-off or an Anderson 1-off, or if I'm on a lower owned team like Minnesota, you can certainly just run 3, White Sox back with them or something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess the flip side here would be where you're working those Minnesota bats individually, right? Compared to Chicago. If there is that pivot, dare I say, with the Twins. Same.
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, the ownership is definitely more favorable on Minnesota. It's also just a much, much worse spot. So I'm not saying that I think you should be playing, tons and tons of Minnesota here, but I do think Minnesota is an example of one of the teams. Like the Padres aren't getting a lot of ownership. Minnesota's not getting a lot of ownership. You can use those teams to kind of balance out the total ownership of your lineup if you are going to the White Sox.
All right, so let's look now, San Diego here, and we'll take into account because this night slate, I guess, a little different, right, for DK than it will be for FanDuel. So looking at this more so from, I have that right, or is mine just not updated yet, right?
What was your question?
Well, we have the 4 on FanDuel, but only the 3 on DK, right?
Yeah, 3 on DraftKings. It doesn't include the Padres game.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so making sure I'm not losing my mind. But we can look at that from, I imagine, from a Showdown standpoint too. So if there is, yes, so that's available clearly from, which I'm sure you were thrilled to break down from all angles in an individual game tonight. Now, look, you can tell me about Sniper once we get through this Padres game as well. It's your world, brother.
I still haven't finished that. I need to watch the last episode. I keep forgetting.
Well, okay. Well, is that not like the biggest ringing endorsement of a show where you stop after the penultimate episode?
So no, it's actually, I went on vacation. I think that's what it was. I went on vacation and just like forgot about it and then came back and haven't watched it.
Okay. You're going to get to it at some point.
Yeah. Maybe after the show.
All right. Nice. All right. Let's look at that Padres game. We'll take it in comparison here on the rest of the slate with FanDuel. And we can start, of course, with the pitchers, and then we'll break it down again from a DK standpoint. Now, Musgrove, we've been talking about Musgrove all night as far as comparing him to everybody else on the slate. You've talked about both Peralta, Giolito's part of me, as far as, pivots here, especially because the ownership is not too much. But let's just look at how much you're getting to Musgrove individually on FanDuel lineups. And again, I have him at 55%. So might be right at the field, might be a little over depending on your lineups here, but also at 9K, he is clearly the cheapest of the three options as well.
Yeah, so my assumption on FanDuel is that I would probably get around the field on Musgrove. But I do think that it's a lot easier to get away from him on FanDuel than it was on DraftKings on the main slate because, with DraftKings, with the two pitchers, obviously you're just going to get to more of him naturally. And then there was, a price difference as well. On FanDuel, it's a little bit easier to get away because you only need the one pitcher. And then hitters are pretty cheap. We just talked about how cheap a lot of the White Sox are. That's the case for, just a lot of hitters on the slate. So it's not that difficult to go from Joe Musgrove to Freddie Peralta for $1,200 more, for example, and get half the ownership. It's not that difficult to find $500 and get Lucas Giolito at, like a quarter of the ownership. So I do like going to those guys, assuming the weather cooperates in the Milwaukee game, but especially Giolito at only $500 more, I think makes for a really good pivot just because it's, you're only rostering one pitcher, and Giolito pretty easily can beat Joe Musgrove on any given slate.
Do you like the matchup itself outside of the comparison on the slate from a DFS standpoint? He's sitting on OddsShopper at 6.5 Ks, and it is Miami. I mean, they are just a humongous dog in San Diego tonight. The Park as well, with the expected run total at 7.5. So I wonder, 6.5, you would think just based on the matchup, maybe on the surface, but you did allude to just what's been going on with Musgrove as of recent. So I wonder if that is either an under or just a stay away at 6.5.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, it's tough because Miami is so bad, but I also just don't really buy into what Joe Musgrove's doing right now. So I think it's probably a stay away for me. The concern that I have for Musgrove is now you basically have 11 start. He had 11 starts, give or take, before the foreign substance crackdown, and he's had 11 starts since. So just using June 1st as the date, I think the actual date was like June 5th or something, but using June 1st, you get 11 starts on each side. In his first 11 starts of the season, he struck out 33.5% of hitters, only walked 5%, 0.9 home runs per 9 innings. That's the first 11 starts of the year. In his most recent 11 starts, he's only struck out 22.9% of hitters. The walk rate's up to 7.6%, which is like 2.5 points higher than it was. He's allowing 1.2 home runs per 9. It just seems like he's lost, to a large extent, he's lost his command. Like the spin rate isn't really down on his stuff. So it's not that. He's just, I think, having trouble locating. He's walking more guys. He's missing within the strike zone, and that's what, leads to more home runs. So I don't think he's as good as he was earlier in the year, but Miami also is just so bad, it probably doesn't matter.
Now, is there any play at all here on Zach Thompson? Because he is cheap. Now, again, we'd have to look at this, again, from a FanDuel standpoint, right? Because you're not going to play. I imagine he's not going to be your captain tonight in a showdown. So looking at this is going to be a long shot. Like this is going to play off of the Park and the fact that this is just anticipated as a low scoring game. And maybe it's not Musgrove's night or lightning strikes, whatever it may be. This would be the contingent, like the total punt plan. But is there anything at all to where you may be able to get to Thompson in one or two of 100 or 150 lineups?
Yeah, I think getting a little bit is fine if you're playing that many lineups. Like for example, on DraftKings, I have 4%. That's, basically nothing, but he's still there. But, if you're playing fewer lineups, I don't like Zach Thompson that much here. He has seemingly taken a step back after a really, really good start to the season. He hasn't pitched as well recently. It is a tough matchup against the Padres, even without Fernando Tatis. It's still a really good lineup. And then the biggest thing for me, I think, is that with FanDuel being a one-pitcher site, it's just so easy to get relatively low-owned pitchers without going completely off the board. Like, for example, on FanDuel, I wouldn't have anywhere near the amount of Carlos Hernandez that I have on DraftKings. It's just that on DraftKings, it's really hard to get low-owned pitchers without taking a risk like that. So when you look at FanDuel, Jameson Taillon is $700 more expensive than Zach Thompson. He's getting like 3% ownership, whereas Thompson's getting 1%. I would rather just go to Taillon because functionally, it's serving the same purpose as Zach Thompson would be. It's getting you a really low-owned pitcher that has a decent chance of success, even though he's clearly not as good as the guys ahead of him. I think I would just rather get to Taillon over Thompson.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think just the numbers kind of jump out at you, especially because of the super low ownership that you could work around in that Yankees-Royals game with both pitchers as you've laid out. We got to give Jordan some props. Real quick, though, as a reminder, as mentioned earlier, with the 2 new channels that we have on YouTube for you to subscribe to if you haven't already. And if you haven't subscribed to here, my goodness, we've been telling you that forever. But it's the same scenario, right? Our fantasy football channel, our odds channel. We want you to subscribe. We want you to hit that like button for all of the videos that you're following along and staying up to date with everything that's happening. And the notification bell is huge so that you don't miss shows, especially now that you have to bounce around with not one, but 3 amazing channels that we have here. Again, just hit that link pinned in the YouTube chat to subscribe to these channels and make sure you hit those notifications on. So Jordan was getting slandered in the chat, and I was a little surprised at that. I mean, this is a man who handles pressure better than an airplane pilot handling turbulence. And people were just crushing him because we had a little hiccup or skip. Now, I have shitty weather here in Philly, so I thought maybe it was me. Who knows, right, what the situation is. And we did have people jumping in at him, being like, hold on, Jordan's got this. But of all things to be impatient with, one thing for you, even more understandable for me, but I was a little shocked that people were coming after Jordan, man. And he got it right, so congrats.
Yeah, pretty surprising. Jordan does a good job back there.
That's about as nice of a compliment as you're going to get from Adam Scherer.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, man. All right. This is your favorite part of the show, where we get to break down one game with 2 teams. You love this. Come on, you live for this Musgrove game tonight as far as a DK. It's the only way we can do anything more on this game since we've covered the slate on FanDuel. Now, I did crunch a bunch here, and I'm getting, and I even added a little bit more to this. So I'm working with 3 unique players in each crunch, and I crunched 20 just to see what the hell would happen here. And as expected, I mean, I'm getting to like the 9th or 10th lineup before I'm having more than one Marlin in this. Is that pretty much the general approach that you're going to have as well, which is this is going to be pretty weighted to San Diego and maybe 1 or 2 Marlins?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. Like, I'm not playing it personally, but if I were playing it, that's probably the approach I would take. I don't know a ton about MLB Showdown. Like, I think the only time I really play it is during the postseason. But I would expect that you're just going to get a lot of Musgrove captain, and then 1, maybe 2 Marlins bats, but it's going to be Padres stacks with Musgrove. So obviously the contrarian approach would be to go to Miami and hope that everyone's captain gets lit up and you have success that way, but it's still a pretty low probability approach.
So let's just look at this like we would one-offs, I guess, on a slate, right? To where you start to look at who jumps out, who would be the biggest appeal here. And yeah, I mean, Cronenworth, Frazier, Machado, Hosmer, these are the guys in order who are popping up as captains first. And then these are all one Marlins lineup. So I guess let's just take the obvious side here. And if we were looking at this game on a 5, 10, 12 game slate, and I understand that I'm asking you to suspend one hypothetical, which is compared to cost and everything else, but just in general, looking at one-offs and bats that you would be interested in popping. And then we can also apply here some salary as well, because a lot of these guys are going to be priced accordingly to this individual game.
Yeah. So, I mean, Zach Thompson hasn't really struggled against righties or lefties this year. 142 expected ISO to righties, 147 to lefties. So there's not a whole lot to look at there and say, I'm really targeting guys from one side of the plate over the other. So I think it's basically you're just going to look for the best hitters that you can on the Padres. So you're going to get, Machado jumping up, Jake Cronenworth, a 380 expected WOBA, 213 expected ISO against right-handed pitching since last season. Those 2 guys are going to look really, really good. I think that Grisham, a little bit lower in the order, maybe not getting quite as much ownership. He's another guy that has some power, though. But I think Machado and Cronenworth in particular from the Padres side. And then kind of the same thing with Miami. Like, Musgrove overall this year has been pretty good. Again, he's having more home run issues of late. So I think with Miami, you're just going to look to the guys that are actually decent hitters. There's not many of them, but Brian Anderson is a good hitter. Jesus Aguilar does have power. So I think those 2 guys are going to be who stands out for Miami.
All right, so just curious here what happens if I crunch a heavy Marlins lineup and keep out, and I only had max 2 Padres on crunches, and still the first 2 lineups have Machado as captain and Cronenworth as captain. Is that just, in general, is that just a strategy that you can get away with in a showdown to where even if you're, and I guess this is more so where you have a team like Miami that you're taking such a big risk on. It's not like a normal strategy you would apply. But in this particular case, where you have such a heavy favorite in San Diego and you're trying to work contrary to the field, I wonder if is that even worth that strategy to still lock in the favorite as a captain and then just run heavy with Brinson, Rojas, Anderson, Aguilar?
Yeah, I think it's still fine because really what you're trying to accomplish in those builds, I think, is that you're counting on a bad game from Musgrove. And so you're going to still get, you're going to get your points from the Miami guys, but Musgrove having a bad game doesn't mean that, the Padres aren't hitting well also. And also, like, so many people are going to play Musgrove at captain that going to Machado at captain or going to Cronenworth at captain is going to be relatively contrarian, in addition to the fact that you're stacking against Musgrove, which is going to be really contrarian. So I don't have any issues with, still having one of the really good Padres hitters as a captain and then, stacking Miami.
How often should you be running a pitcher just in general? I got burned. The difference between me hanging around at the top of that tournament last night and finishing where I did, which was still fine. I mean, I'm not complaining by any means, was not running Dillon, was not running Cease, right? Was not running a pitcher at all. And I just wonder, look, if you're mass entering 150 lineups, that's one thing. But if you're throwing a couple of them in there, how important is it? And this might be the bad example, Adam, because you do have such an imbalance when it comes to the expectation of pitchers. And I guess you could argue last night as well. But how often should you be getting to a pitcher if it's captain or just in rotation in these showdowns?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it depends what contests you're playing. Like in cash, you're going to be prioritizing pitching because it's just a lot, it's a higher floor, it's more projectable. So they're going to look better in cash. Tournaments, you can go a little bit more off the board. And then, obviously a home run is basically a decent start. Like if you get 14 points from a pitcher, it's not good, but it's not bad. So in tournaments, taking the upside and hoping that you get, a home run and a double and get 20 points, which beats both pitchers is fine. But it's still just lower probability. It's going to lower your projection. So a lot of it's going to come down to who the pitcher is, what their ownership looks like. Like tonight, I assume Musgrove's going to be getting a crazy, crazy amount of ownership. So there probably is a little bit more appeal to just not having Musgrove in a nice chunk of lineups. Whereas if people weren't quite as enamored with Musgrove, then maybe you would want to go overweight and just take the points that you're getting at pitcher.
Just a quick update. It is looking like a delay or a late start in Cleveland, right? Is that what we're getting?
In Chicago.
Chicago. Pardon me. Jeez, what am I saying? Cleveland. That game's underway. So it looks like that is a reality now, right?
I hadn't seen it, but I'll take your word for it.
Last I checked, 6:00 had that graphic of the cloud and the rain down. It wasn't even like, the cloud, just the cloud. It was actual rain. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a late start. I just haven't seen that it officially is.
I just want to go back to that real quick. And then I saw our buddy News God put a question out there that may be surprising on the surface, but it does beg the question. That's completely different. Point being here in this one game, though, how much weather is enough for you to say, screw this shit, I'm off this game? A delay? Like, are we waiting for a full-on, because, this thing's going to lock, right, at some point at 8:05. So is just a delay enough for you to abort when it comes to these two teams?
I think it's really, really tough. I was going back and forth on it before the show. But with it being such a small slate, I think, and we're expecting it to start in a delay, right? Like it's one thing if it's not supposed to rain until an hour and a half after the game starts and they decide to start in a delay. I normally just run the other direction when that happens and get off the game entirely. But here it's supposed to be raining at first pitch and then clear up as we get later on in the night. So it makes sense for them to start in a delay. It's still really risky because, again, these teams play tomorrow, they play the day after, they play the day after that. So there's no real incentive for them to be patient and try and force this game in. If it rains for 2 hours, it's pretty easy for them to say, screw it, we'll play tomorrow. So I think it's really risky. But the thing is, it's only a 4-game slate. And if you remove this game, it takes a lot of options off the board. Plus, with it starting to delay, ownership typically is going to go down as well. So I'm right now, if it starts in a delay, I'm going to just roll with it and hope for the best. I don't have crazy amounts of the game anyway. But I'm going to just roll with it and hope that they play, even though I think there's a pretty good chance that they don't.
Okay, so by the way, I did see this because Jordan was killing Eric last time with these GIFs. Now they've been reverted back to GIFs. So depending on where you are and what age group, where are you pulling this from? Just because I have headphones on now? The one to like, you can't do anything, Adam. You have your hat off for one show with a haircut, and Jordan has cropped you on, I don't know, some animal or something like that. And God, no, now he's put me into Austin Powers because I have my headphones on. It's ridiculous, man. You cannot do anything. No wonder why you were so hesitant to give this man props for saving the show. See, look at this.
That's good.
That's pretty damn good. Now, speaking of our buddy, the news god here, he threw this out that you still haven't seen Power. And now I can't judge because that's still on my list too. But what's the all-time show that you haven't seen that you're going to see? It's just a matter of time. Like that you're still kicking yourself that you haven't seen.
That I actually want to see. I don't think I have one because I caught up on I've seen The Wire now. I've seen Sopranos. Those were both on the list. I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but I'm just not interested in watching it. So that doesn't count.
I feel like it's my duty as somebody who was not privy to a binge and sat there and waited 6 days and 23 hours for that god awful show to come back only to be disappointed again. Now, the only difference is that I wasn't paying all the money you were on the lineups you threw out last night, but I had that same feeling every week. I feel like it's my duty to warn you to not see that show. Nothing is ever going to compete with The Wire. The Wire is the best written show you will ever see on television, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, obviously, I'm probably biased a little bit because of living in Baltimore, so I find it extra interesting.
Go ahead. Be biased all you want.
Yeah, but no, I love the show. Like, yeah, it's a little bit outdated in terms of technology and things that happen, but great show, I think.
Well, I saw that now there's going to be new wiretaps on Facebook and Twitter. So I'm thinking to myself, and it's coming out of Baltimore media. So look, man, I smell a reboot here. Right?
The writer was he had some film crew out in Baltimore the other day and tweeted about it. I don't know. I'm not sure what he's working on, but he's doing something.
Really? Wait a second. Okay, David Simon we're talking about here. It's amazing. Yeah, it was an awesome idea for them to just get people who are on the street to write about people on the street, get cops to write about cops, get people in schools to do that. It was insane. I also feel like I should warn you about the night of, because the news god is telling you to watch that. I would go into that a little shaky here. You're not going to be happy with the ending. I'll say that. Yeah, see, now we started something here, Sopranos versus The Wire. That was not my intention by any means.
Yeah,
I think that's unfair.
Yeah, it's like I like The Wire more than Sopranos, but Sopranos is great also.
All right, let's one more time tell you about the amazing package we have for you. Use our promo code for the Awesemo Plus Platinum that you can take full advantage of. So look, if you're going from Awesemo Plus Weekly, $29.95, you'll get full access to everything that we have on awesemo.com. But if you're new to Awesemo Plus Platinum, that's where you can take advantage of this code, MLB Deeper Dive. It's all caps. It's one word. It's the name of the show. 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And you can just take even more advantage of everything we have. Again, the ownership projections are free for you. Now, a couple of more minutes here and just kind of looking one more time to go back at some of the earlier points that we made, especially because we were looking at that first game kind of weird with what was happening on that DK slate. But the Milwaukee-Chicago game, we just talked about that as far as the weather and that really being a major deterrent. Back with that Yankees game, especially if, and this is where I kind of wanted to follow up on the assumption that there's enough rain for it to be a deterrent for you, Adam, to run with these lineups. We talked about just the leverage that the Yankees provide as a whole. So let's assume that the weather has pushed you off this Cubs game. How much more appealing or appetizing are the Yankees from where you anticipated having them, knowing that you kind of have to deal with that lineup not being intact, but you're also paying down significantly for everybody? Does that make sense?
Sort of. Can you?
Yes. Basically, scratch that Cubs game. How much more are you getting to the Yankees specifically because the Cubs game is off the board?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would get to a ton more Yankees. I'd get to a ton more White Sox. The thing is, though, you'd get even more ownership moving toward the Yankees as well if that game were to be postponed. So, right. But yeah, like naturally, you're just going to get more Yankees. You're going to get more White Sox because it makes the slate smaller. I think the one team, and you know, well, I guess on both slates, the one team that I think would really start to jump up for me is the Padres, because they're not really getting much ownership now. And if you take out the Brewers and you assume a lot of that goes to the Yankees and a lot of that goes to the White Sox, you're going to start getting the Yankees and the White Sox a little bit higher owned than they should be, whereas the Padres probably still kind of hang back behind them. And so I think I would actually move a lot of that to the Padres.
So Musgrove is clearly going to get more, I would imagine, especially if Peralta is off the board, right? So
yeah, and you're going to get a lot more going to Giolito as well.
Okay, perfect. Now, how much does that open up the conversation about Zach Thompson, who, while you may have a couple, as we mentioned, and you know, there were both guys in that Royals and Yankees game that appeal a little bit more, either price or just productivity. Just specifically to this game getting canceled, how much now do you think you're going to get more to Zach Thompson?
Yeah, if it got canceled, I think I'd get to Thompson a little bit more, but I think it's more. I mean, I guess I already have so much Carlos Hernandez. I don't think I would get a whole lot more of that. Jamison Taillon, I only have 16%. I think he'd probably jump up for me before Thompson did.
All right, can I just touch on something here, because I'm shocked. At the same time, I'm thrilled that you made this statement on chat. I mean, feel free to jump it out too when we're talking about the damn show. You know, that season 2 for you was do you realize how many people slander season 2 of The Wire?
Oh,
say
yeah.
There's no business in it. They treat it like Temple of Doom.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, like one reason it took me so long to watch The Wire was because the first 2 times I tried to watch it, I got to season 2 and was just like, I can't do this. But then once I've forced myself to watch it, and now I've, seen start to finish twice of the whole show, I love season 2. I think it's one of the best seasons that there is. And it's just so pivotal for the rest of the show.
All right. Now, this is something I've never heard before, where you are a convert. You've gone from hating to loving that season. What changed for you?
I got through it. I started to, I started to get into it more. I think what it is like, at least for me, is you go into The Wire expecting it to be basically what season 1 is.
Yeah.
And so then when season 2 starts, it's just like, what the hell is this? Like, I want to go back and watch more of season 1. And so it just takes a while to like get into season 2.
The docs are so key too and everything. And you find out later clearly. And it's pretty cool. Amy Smart may be the best as far as it is concerned. All right. So let's wind down here. Any final thoughts on overall thoughts? Oh, home run picks. How about that? Do you have any home run pick or two on the way out? I did see earlier, and again, this is weather pending here, Eduardo Escobar plus 320 to hit one out tonight in that Cubs game. Is there anybody that you love from a home run standpoint?
Anybody on the White Sox, really. I guess Abreu probably would be number 1 for me.
I see. I'm sure you're going to get some decent odds too on Odd Shopper. And we did throw those 2 out. Musgrove was the one that, I mean, you really can't find. You can go over. All right, last one here for you. You can go over 7.5 Ks for Musgrove or under 6.5 Ks for Musgrove. Which one do you fire on? You're going to get plus money on both.
Probably under.
Okay. Now we're back tomorrow. We've got a little more games to talk about on that Tuesday deeper dive. So don't worry. We won't have to hit as much wire. Although I am fascinated by your season 2 take, by all means. Live Before Lock comes your way next. That's Eric and Terry. Thank Jordan one more time for all the work that he's done on this. Adam's not, so somebody has to. At Ship My Money DFS is how you can follow Adam. At Shander Show for me. Thanks to Jock Market. Thanks to you all out there. Don't go anywhere. Hit us up with that like. Don't go anywhere. Live Before Lock comes your way next.
He's just pushing through regardless. But they're just chewing.
Jordan can't deal with this crap. Jordan is not getting paid enough to deal with this crap.
He's definitely not.
Literally not at all. Oh, I guess we're getting going.
Probably just got us muted.
Oh, I guess we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the MLB Live Before Lock show presented by One Jock Market. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm going to be taking you guys up here on this 4-game slate that we have coming up here on FanDuel. Oh, joy. What a time to be alive. We've got a couple of, we've got a couple nice games. It's actually a fun 4-gamer as far as 4-gamers go, but I digress. I'm Eric. I'm going to introduce my co-host, my pal in crime, my pal also in cinematic love, Mr. Terry McBride. You know him better on the Twitter sphere as at DigitalB21. There it is. Found it.
They know me so well. I can't blame you for that. Apparently, I just noticed yesterday that apparently I wasn't following you after I threw all those people at your account the other day. I pulled you up and it was unchecked. I felt so bad. I was like, and it said follows you right underneath. So I followed you. So you've got one more. So what's that? 5 or 6 now?
Thanks, Terry.
Welcome.
Wow.
Nice to see you. How are you, pal?
What an asshole. Hey, great to see you this fine afternoon / evening over there. You live 3 hours in the future. It doesn't give you permission to be a dick. But anyway, what you should do, because everybody's a dick to me anyway, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. So you know when this and all the other content at Awesemo is going well and we can be happy and whatever. We're going to talk baseball. Terry, I'm mad at you, but now you get to see an entire show of what it looks like when I'm mad at you. Tell me about this slate. Just start talking.
And that's the last thing you're going to say for the next hour. I'm just going to have to talk. All right, I can do it. So I think it's a really interesting pitching slate from, for only having 4 games. We've got at least 3 guys that are like ace caliber type pitchers. If we want to throw Lucas Giolito into that bucket, or at least guys who
can be. You're going to
say
Jameson Taillon being an ace?
No, I said 3, not 4. And then I was going to throw 4 into and I think Jameson Taillon can pull off a pretty decent start here. So I've got 4 guys in the mix on this slate.
Homer. It's fine. Go ahead. Keep going.
All right. This is what it's going to be like. All right. I'm with you. So, I mean, look, he's been pitching fairly well. They're really, really overreacting to it on the Yankees broadcasts, kind of like they do on everything, which is why people think Lucas Voit is a great player and all of these different things. But he has been pitching fairly well over his last handful of starts. Like 8 out of the last 10 games, he's gotten through relatively clean, like 2 or 3 earned runs, handful of strikeouts. The strikeouts have ticked up a little bit. Overall, 107 innings and 21 starts. And he's going up against the Kansas City team that is mediocre at best. So I think he can give us a serviceable start here. But the question is, does he equal the heights that like a Freddie Peralta or Joe Musgrove can get to against those 2 lineups? If Lucas Giolito can get through clean, which I think he can against Minnesota without giving up any mistake kind of home runs, I think he can rack up strikeouts against that lineup. So Taillon's the low man on the totem pole for sure, but I think he's at least worth some shares, and it's easy to get over the field on him. So I don't mind getting there. I mean, under 3-ish% ownership on the FanDuel in the last update I saw, waiting on the new one to hit any second now, I'm sure. So we'll see where he ends up. But I mean, it's pretty easy to get beyond the field on him. So he's somebody I'm going to be trying to push, 2-3 times the field, depending on where it ends up. And then I'll take big shares of the other guys, but maybe undercut on at least one of them.
I can't be mad at you, Terry McBride. I like you too much. So we're back. We're back. I absolutely think that with FanDuel specifically. So, I mean, we're going to be reacting over on DraftKings to what's going on in this Cleveland game. I think that will affect how I handle a lot of my lineups. I talk a lot in NBA about late swap, how you always need to be ready to rock. I think right now, Wilson Ramos hitting a home run, that's kind of an interesting deal with the DraftKings slate, what I'm trying to do at that position. Either punt way down or you try to beat him with a catcher like a Sal Perez, although he's not my favorite guy at 5K, right on right, going up against Taillon, who has pretty marked splits. I'm probably going to be gearing away from a lot of the Royals. I was expecting to get to a little bit more of them than what I probably am here on FanDuel. But looking at the ownerships right now for the pitching slate, specifically, we're talking FanDuel because, again, DK, we can revisit. We can talk as we're going. Adam did a great job of covering that. We've got the blue side expert in Terry McBride here, so we might as well utilize it. Joe Musgrove, 9K. Coming in, 24% top pitcher percentage, 55% ownership. We'll see how this weather ends up shaking out here in Chicago. But Lucas Giolito, then 9,500, seems like the automatic pivot here up against Minnesota. It's only 500 more. Should he be 1/5 of the ownership of Joe Musgrove? I say absolutely not. How are you kind of handling this disparity in the ownership?
Yeah, I'm very much with you on that. I think the field should definitely be lower on the Musgrove side of things. So it's going to push my shares to Lucas Giolito in Cruncher, I just kind of gave those top guys like 20-25% each and just let it fly, with a few shares able to go to Zach Thompson and Carlos Hernandez as well, but very, very small amounts. Burrows and Alec Mills are just off of my player pool. So I'm going with big shares of all those guys in Cruncher. But once it goes into the process where leverage and popularity matter, I expect it's going to push Peralta unless I have to pull him for weather concerns. It's definitely going to push Giolito. It'll give me more tie-on. And Musgrove's the guy that I expect to undercut. I expect I'll still have a huge share of them, especially if I was entering 150 lineups. I'm only doing 50 again since we're doing live before lock. But across 150 lineups, if the field was at 50 some odd percent, I'd be happy around 35%. I think that gives me still a very good shot at, putting together a lineup that plays well in terms of where the field is going to be. And I'm still able to dedicate 15% of my full portfolio of lineups to additional Giolito shares where the field isn't, additional tie-on shares where the field isn't, maybe spread out to some different bats that the field is getting to. So yeah, I really like that play. I think Giolito should be higher owned and Musgrove should be lower owned.
We just got an update here from Loco. He just DM'd me. Always a nice thing. He I'm pretty sure follows me on Twitter and has for quite a while. I think he likes me a lot more. Might be a nicer person. I don't know. But Loco, the man, thank you so much. Said Northern Illinois, currently 5 tornado warnings. Seems like a bad idea to possibly play baseball and such things. It's just a personal opinion, but it seems like something that we should be on the lookout for. I'm probably going to hit evict on a lot of my Peralta shares. I had a little bit of Milwaukee sprinkled in as one-offs. Specifically, Adames is like a contrarian 5.5K. He was kind of the lower owned of the grouping here of some of the Milwaukee bats. Probably going to just remove this game entirely until we get further word. Maybe that seems like a mistake because it's winds blowing out here in Wrigley. It would be a great hitting environment. I wouldn't even mind getting to a few one-offs of the Cubs, Ortega, Happ specifically, maybe a little Wisdom, but I'm probably just going to be avoiding that game. Have you looked at this weather? Are you kind of thinking the same?
I mean, tornado warning's got to be a little bit concerning, I guess. But although if there are 5 of them and they're strategically placed around the ballpark, maybe they just cancel each other out and it's just in a nice little eye vortex kind of thing and they can play clean. But yeah, it's concerning. I would think, at least, especially for pitching, if they have to delay, come back, lightning, things like that, even if the storm doesn't hit with a ton of rain, if they have to clear the field and delay for any kind of length of time, you never know what's going to happen with some of these starters, particularly with a precious arm like Freddie Peralta. You don't know if they have an extended delay that he's going to take the mound again. So that's a concern. You have the delay and the postponement concern are somewhat obvious. That said, looking at Dark Sky, it's like a 7:30 to 9:30 basically block of rain. And then it's just mostly cloudy, partly cloudy. So it looks like it clears up fairly quickly. One of these passing, summer, several hour kind of a storms. So maybe they get the opportunity to play it clean. If they start in a delay, I think we can expect them to start it around 9-ish or something like that and play it clean. It's just the concern that Adam brought up too, that this is, it's a 4-game set. This is the first game of it. They're at Wrigley where they love to play day games anyway. So they wouldn't have any qualms about rescheduling this for a doubleheader. It's a divisional opponent that's relatively close by. So if they need to move this game, it would be simple for them to do. So as far as risks of postponement go, this would be higher than my normal situation for what I see on the radar with this game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make a little bit of sense. I just saw J-Ram hit a triple RBI. That's useful. And then Reyes just dribbled one to third base. Awesome. Great job. So those two heavily invested. Sorry, what?
Yeah, no. So if we're gonna be talking about some of those DK shares and how to make some pivots and everything throughout the show, can you break down where you ended up on the DK slate in terms of some of those shares that are existing right now and what you might be thinking about where you're needing to make some of those pivots? What are you anticipating and where are you to start with?
Well, so this is the fun part. And I love these kind of slates and I love having a show on these slates because a lot of the work that I do for baseball and for pretty much every sport that allows late swap is I'm working after all the way up until the last lock. For me, the work really starts after the slate begins. You're putting in all the work that everybody else is as well. But there's opportunities to change your lineups to kind of tweak what you need to. And MLB is a lot more difficult because if you have open roster spots, you have an opportunity to win any tournament. Anybody that is still left available is able to kind of come through and be the stack that you need. Now, as you work west, the temperature generally gets worse. You're talking about Anaheim, Los Angeles, San Diego specifically, San Francisco specifically, Arizona with the humidifier. all of them are better pitching environments than they are hitting environments. Those usually exist out east. That's confusing. I apologize. But what happens is that you still have these offenses that are just coming in lower owned. Either the lineups aren't out or it's just a bad hitting environment. Miami is your team that if you have absolutely dead lineups and you want to pivot to somebody that you know is going to be 1-2% in the hopes of trying to take something down, you can move that direction. I'm probably not going to be moving that direction because I think they are such markedly bad plays. But even if you get like one-off home runs from like one or two guys there from Miami, whether it's Brian De La Cruz at 0% owned or Magnarius Scherer, who might be leading off here in this spot. We don't have that lineup, but talking about like, if you have a dead lineup, like if you have a 5-man from Cincinnati and they get to the 6th or 7th inning here, we'll know, like we'll have another 45 minutes to kind of look at it here. I'm looking at piecing them together in some of those lineups that I have Cincinnati shares of just to try to salvage min cashes. And it's incredible how even like a 3 or 4% ROI that you can get off of doing stuff like that to just dead lineups. Because if you have Yankees as one-offs in those lineups, I apologize. They're just not going to do much. Specifically on FanDuel here, we're looking at the White Sox being the chalk, and we'll get to that later. But as I'm going through everything here on DK, I'm constantly swapping. I'm constantly switching. I'm constantly trying to tweak my lineups in order to have a chance. And I have enough, like I only have 20 because I want to be on a stream and be useful. If I had 150, going through by hand and doing some of this is a ton of work, but people aren't willing to do it. And I am, so I might as well keep doing it. It's helped me in the long run just to be profitable. And, if you have a 5-man, again, I'm looking at everything here, India, Votto, and Winker, that 3-man specifically has a cumulative 11 points. If you get to the 6th or 7th inning and you still are sitting on those numbers, if you have Wilson Ramos, who has 16 points in a catcher spot, and you're trying to catch that position, you need to kind of do some things to mix it up here and find those lower owned plays to kind of not just get to the field there and try to salvage a min cash, but specifically if you're trying to win a tournament and you don't have that catcher spot with 16 points right now, it's going to make for an interesting build. So I'm going way cheap at catcher. So those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about constantly. Again, we don't ever really do shows after lock for baseball, but 0% of the time we do that. So it's fun to talk through my process a little bit. So if you have anything to add to anything that I said, Terry, go right ahead. But for me, that's kind of what I'm looking at. And it's nice to be able to dig into this on a shorter slate.
Yeah. So just to pull on the Ramos example a little bit more, given that, all right, so you have a lineup that doesn't have him or a bunch of lineups that don't have him, say, and we're looking to, in that situation that you described, now we want to make him more competitive. We know we've got to make that point block up from that position somewhere. So we're looking for a later pivot. Now, you mentioned Sal Perez earlier. He's probably going to be the most likely to be the highest owned catcher on that later block of games. So we're not necessarily, in my mind, looking to pivot to Sal. And I would think that a lot of people, anybody who is out there willing to do this work, would also be, thinking in terms of, all right, Sal would be the best guy to go to here, but maybe I don't go that direction. So I think we're dealing with a lot of people who are probably operating on a similar level. So what's the pivot that you'd be looking to that's maybe not as highly owned as Sal? We've got a short slate of examples to work with. Are we looking to somebody who's maybe significantly lower end than Sal, but in a great lineup like Sevy? Are we looking to, it doesn't look like we've got a DK catcher. Oh no, we've got Ryan Jeffers in the Twins lineup who's super low owned.
Yeah, Gallagher is super low owned. I don't want to play Gallagher either, but those are kind of the things. So again, you can't necessarily catch 16 here, and there's going to be zeros and things that exist in the catcher spot. There's also going to be probably one more guy at least that homers out of this grouping. I would have to say the two that seem the most likely for me would be Omar Narvaez and Sal Perez. Wilson Contreras going up against Peralta, probably wouldn't want to be picking on that. We don't know what this weather is going to look like in Milwaukee. Another thing to really talk about too is if everybody's going to hit eject, if we get really bad news here about Milwaukee and you feel like you have a dead lineup, fire up Milwaukee and Chicago. Just like play those players because the lineup's already dead. You're going to get them at like 2%. Now, Miami is going to be right around 2% as well. But do you really want to go after a 2.8 implied total as opposed to two teams, 3.6? It was higher up point, like 3.9 earlier today for the Cubs and 5.4, 5.5 for Milwaukee. Like going to those teams and pivoting onto them, if they're going to just be completely unowned in those dead lineups, I have no problem with that because I think they're far more likely to go off than Miami.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no need to, other than attacking the 50+% ownership on the FanDuel slate and the 77+% ownership for Musgrove on DK, other than just specifically trying to do that, you're just going to a team that's just not any good. Jazz Chisholm, one of their best players, was questionable last I saw. I don't think we've got the confirmed lineup for Miami yet. You've got Jorge Alfaro also questionable in the projected lineup here. So it could be a diminished version of what is already a bad lineup. So it's just not a great spot. Could they absolutely go off against Joe Musgrove here and put up a handful of runs and be one of the more relevant teams because nobody's on them? And we'll see a bunch of different people with specifically Marlins stacks up toward the top of the standings. Sure, it could happen. Is it one of the most likely things in the range of outcomes? It's definitely not. So I'm just happier to attack a better spot. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Oh God, this is fun. I love talking the strategy element of DFS and kind of what we're doing with our lineups a lot more than I do. Hey, play these guys, play them. When we're playing a lot of range of outcome in an ownership game constantly in MLB DFS, for me, it's nice to talk a little bit more game theory and to kind of go on those tangents. I feel like that's always been the best part of my game, more so than just, hey, give me the guy who hits 2 home runs tonight. Well, if I knew that guy, I would probably just play 100% of him and win all the money along with you. Usually that's Nelson Cruz, but I digress. Let's party on, Garth. Betting you, Reed. Let's do this. Betting you. You need to be checking out this lovely stuff that we have going between Ben Ross and Matt Kajewski for college football. It is so good, and they are so sharp. You want to talk about sharp human beings. They are both fantastic in the college football space, whether it's talking about SEC winners. I love talking about these smaller conferences, MAC winners, looking at some of their year-long bets. I'm going to Vegas this week, and I'm going to be firing some futures. Georgia 11.5, take the over on that, by the way. But I'm loving all of their college football talk on Betting You, and I think you will too. So check out that podcast. Go to Spotify. Go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from and check Betting You. It is so great. And then we've got 2 new YouTube channels. Lovely Jordan Klein, the best producer in the game named Jordan, has a Awesemo fantasy football. He's got that pulled up, in the Awesemo odds sports betting channel over on YouTube. They're pinned in the YouTube chat. Check those out. Hit subscribe. I promise you, you will learn a ton. You will be getting prepped for the NFL season, which is upon us. It's here. I mean, we had the Hall of Fame game. We've got a Thursday preseason game. We've got full slates for the weekends for some of these preseason games. It's going to get nuts here. And you want to be subscribed to those projections. You want to be checking out these videos and these contents and be ready for week 1. Massive contests already posted on DraftKings and FanDuel. Get yourself prepped on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Check them out. Thank you so much. All right, let's talk some pitching. We're talking FanDuel a little bit more. I'll try to touch over with some DK plays as well. We talked a little bit about the top of the board. Let's start talking about some of these middling options. On FanDuel specifically, we have underneath a total cumulative, if I'm counting this right, of 9% for Taillon, Thompson, Hernandez, Mills, and Burrows. Who could you possibly be looking at? Who's your priority between those 5? Do you have any shares of those other 5 and kind of make a case for them?
Yeah, so out of those guys, it's for me, it's clearly Taillon. I think there's an argument to be made for the strikeout acumen that we've seen so far from Carlos Hernandez going up against the Yankees lineup, because we all know there are strikeouts. It's also kind of a weird, diminished version of that Yankees lineup. I don't really trust that spot. I don't really believe that he's the pitcher that we've seen so far. So I expect him to kind of regress. It's Adam mentioned the exact percentage that he's pitching ahead of his strikeout percentage that we've seen from him in the minor leagues. I think he said 4% ahead. So he's at a 28.1% strikeout rate over 39 1/3, 4 starts in the majors. If he's a league average-ish strikeout rate kind of a guy in AAA, I expect he's going to be below that. This Yankees team, for all their strikeouts, is patient. They walk a lot. They get on base. This kid's also got a 14% walk rate. He allows 7.2% barrel balls. He allows a 44.3% hard hit rate. So for me, it's just not a safe spot. It's certainly a GPP spot. And nobody's going to be on him, and he only costs $6,500. So you can justify it along those lines. I would maybe roll the dice on a few shares in a big slate of lineups. You don't need to do much to get ahead of the field on Carlos Hernandez, but I'm just much more interested in Jamison Taillon and potentially more interested in Zach Thompson, although I don't love that. And I kind of want to use the Padres here because I feel like the Padres bats are the best team that's going completely ignored as far as stacking the offense goes. And it's not against a great pitcher. Like Thompson's pitching to around league average numbers, 24.3% strikeout rate, 4.17 xFIP, induces 12.2% swinging strikes, but below average on the CSW at 27.8%, 8.6% barrel balls. keeps the ball to a 10 degree average launch angle. So it's a lot of line drives, some ability to elevate, 37.1% hard hit. I think there's upside for the Padres, and with nobody going to it, I'd rather be on the bat side of that one. But I can see some argument for at price and at ownership, Thompson shares being valuable as well, in just the same idea, short slate. If all the other pitchers go pop, then you kind of want to be on one of these spots that's cheap, gets you to a bunch of the bats against those guys. But for me, the most realistic one of these guys is Eytan going up against that Royals team. I think he's got a shot to give us a fairly clean start, maybe a little bit of strikeout upside, 24.1% strikeout rate for him on the season. The Royals, although the one thing they do well, 21.9% strikeout rate on the season for their active roster against righties, sixth best in baseball. They create runs 11% worse than average, not that much power to speak of. So I think he gets through clean, maybe gives us a handful of strikeouts, which might be all we need.
I think it's Carlos Hernandez. I think it has to be for me, specifically not just because you're getting some leverage on the field to try to take out some of these Yankee shares, because right now, looking over at our top stacks tool, at the top of it, you've got the White Sox, Milwaukee. I'm expecting Milwaukee to crash, coming up closer to lock as we get word on this game, because it'll be starting in a delay more than likely, and it'll carry on here for a while. And that's kind of my guess. And I think that that's going to flood to White Sox and Yankees here. I love the San Diego call. I think that really sets up well. But specifically, I'm looking at Hernandez, 28.1% K percentage. And yes, a lot of it was out of the bullpen. So I think that that's inflated slightly. We've seen some decent stuff in his first two major league starts here, like as he's starting to get stretched out. And now he got up to 93 pitches against the White Sox, a very competent offense, obviously. 6 Ks in that spot, gave up the solo shot there, 1 earned run over the course of that work, 22.5 and 22.9 DK points here. I'm looking at this entire lineup here for the Yankees, and sure, there's some dangerous spots, but other than DJ LeMahieu, everybody else has a 23+% K percentage. A lot of them giving up the platoon outside of Gallo, outside of Gardner, and I'm not really counting them here. Andrew Velasquez, we don't have a large enough sample size, but nearly 30% in his limited time here in the majors. I absolutely love getting to Hernandez on DK, where you can get those salary savings, kind of get up to Machado, Cronenworth, get a little bit different with San Diego. And same thing over on FanDuel. If I'm going to take a shot on anybody down there, and Taillon is rightfully like low owned as well, so 3.5% there. I wouldn't mind getting to a little bit more him and a little less Musgrove and taking it off the top there. But out of the other 4, I thought that I was going to land on a lot more Zach Thompson earlier in the day. I'm just not going to do it. I think that he's bound for some regression. And I think Carlos Hernandez is a little bit of a wild card, but at 1.5% against this Yankees iteration of this lineup with no Rizzo, with really no guys who really limit like they just strike out a bunch. So I'm thinking he's kind of my guy. I'm not sure what you think about that, or if you have a rebuttal, because I know you are the Yankees fan, but I also know you're a rational man.
Yeah, and rationality is what we'll go with here on this one. So you touched on the Yankee strikeout rates, and that's absolutely valid, right? But what the Yankees do well, and the reason that the Yankees tolerate those strikeout rates, is that a lot of these guys walk. These are patient hitters. They're discerning hitters, right? Yep. So Brett Gardner is having an awful season. He's still walking at a 14.2% rate. That's in the upper echelon of the league. Joey Gallo, for his 33.1% strikeout rate, among qualified hitters, leads baseball with an 18.8% walk rate. The top hitters in the lineup here, you've got the weird Brett Gardner leadoff situation that's going on. He's at a 320 on base, just around average. But between Stanton, Judge, and Gallo, where most of those strikeouts lie, they're 364, 365, 370 on base percentages, 28%, 40%, 34% better than average, creating runs, 191, 229, 259 ISOs. I'm going to call that like 67, 68 home runs between them combined, just eyeballing it. Following that up with DJ LeMahieu is you're putting a very, very solid bat at a cheap price behind those guys who has the ability to drive them in. He hasn't displayed it this year, but he's still great at generating on base and moving the lineup along. So it'll be interesting to see him in that spot. I'm not Luke Voigt's biggest fan, but he's got the power. We know that that's there. He's the first guy in the lineup where you start talking about, all right, he's not a discerning hitter, right? One of his biggest problems is that he doesn't walk at the rates that a Judge, a Stanton, one of these more, these premier power hitter types do. I'll also argue about, his actual power acumen. We saw a huge display of power last year in a short sample, but the year before it was 500 and something plate appearances where he only hit 21 home runs. So, I mean, that puts him on par with, a lot of average-ish kind of hitters. So New York made a big deal out of it and people got really excited about him. I think he's more the hitter that we've seen this year overall. I mean, he's struggled this year. That's kind of unfair. He's better than like a 125 ISO and 3 home runs in 126 plate appearances. But I think he's more the 30% strikeouts, the lowish kind of walks. He's at 8.7% walks and around 20-ish home runs kind of a guy. And, so he's significantly overblown. But as a 6 hitter in this lineup, backing up all those guys being on base, it's just going to put that power opportunity in dangerous situations against a kid who's giving up a 44.3% hard hit rate, a 16.9 degree average launch angle, 90 miles an hour of average exit velo. So that's a lot of home run trajectory. It just concerns me, but I absolutely agree. The strikeouts are there. The ownership opportunity is there. It's a major leverage situation with all the ownership that's flocking to the Yankees and probably is continuing to grow as that Milwaukee game gets more and more concerning. So yeah, it's an interesting GPP spot to attack. No doubt about it.
Oh, rip Luis Castillo up to 5 earns. So yeah, I'm going to turn I have no Castillo. Never mind. I don't have to worry about that. Wow. I didn't even notice that. That's cool. That's probably the best good thing that's happened to me on Live Before Lock was I just found out 0% of that. That's actually just a mistake and an oversight. I was probably getting too involved in chat. Somebody said I was feisty today. I like being feisty. I'm okay with that. Yeah. Jordan Clancy. Yes, you have been. Good to know. I was just spamming the golf show. It was a blast. All right. Let's continue ourselves along. Anything else to really round out with pitching here? Anything you want to talk about? Bo Burrows, I don't want to talk about. I love White Sox, of course. I think on FanDuel, they're coming in really, really high owned. But anything really to touch on ownership-wise or just generally I like overviewing the rest of these pitchers?
I think we covered most of it. I mean, we'll talk about some of the spots where, are we taking some shots with like Miami against the Musgrove ownership and stuff like that as we get into bats. Assuming the Milwaukee-Chicago game, let's say it was a sunny day. Obviously, we know that Freddie Peralta would be an awesome pitcher to have here. Would you be getting to any Alec Mills against Milwaukee there on a sunny day? Is he of interest to you at all, like in a clean situation on this slate? For me, like I said, I just kind of took him out of the player pool.
Yeah, I don't have any shares. My big issue with him is that you're just never getting any strikeouts. Like he's got nearly a 16% strikeout rate, goes down a little bit against lefties. And so like, this is all, I just think Brewers, I think lefties between Wong, Yelich now back, Narvaez, Escobar, Garcia, lots of guys from both sides there. Rowdy Tellez now isn't exactly a free out. What was that?
Yeah, no, that's who I was jumping on. Yeah, Rowdy Tellez in there.
Dude, he's been freaky good so far. Kind of absurd. 448 expected slugging. If you had told me it would have been right around that range, coming off of his Toronto tenure, I would have said you were absolutely crazy. That guy was useless. But he's found a little something in Milwaukee. And, I think everybody who comes into Milwaukee, at least for a hot second, finds something. Yelich is starting to lose something, and I don't know what's going on there other than probably just a bad back. But lefties here in this spot, got to be really liking them here. Mills just doesn't really get these swings and misses. Looking at this barrel percentage, he really does limit hard contact, 4% barrels in that regard, 38.5% hard hit percentage. That's kind of flatline. That's really just below that 40% mark. That's about league average. I feel like that's decent. Maybe he could survive getting innings, but keeping the ball on the ground. But God, I just don't see it here.
Yeah. And, the barrel ball rate is what's saving him in a lot of my little metrics as far as run creation, sequential hitting go. Mm-hmm. That I look at strikeout rate, walk rate, and the barrel ball there. So with the low strikeout rate, a relatively highish kind of a walk rate at 7.2%. That's why I just kind of took him off the board and, throw in the rain factor and everything else. He's just completely uninteresting to me. But I was just curious if you would be getting to him at all on like a nice day. And I just don't see it. I agree with everything you just said about him. I don't see it at all for him.
Yeah, I don't see it at all. But I also am hoping that it's kind of flatline for Milwaukee too, especially with some of the ownership we saw earlier. I might get there a little bit as we're getting down to the end. Again, we have 30 minutes. I'm going to be watching the weather. Loco is checking in every second here with me in Slack. He's just on top of his game here today. Said that, it might be questionable. Somebody, one of the weatherman that exists in the world, put it to like a 35% risk of getting postponed. I don't know what that means, but I also know that if this game starts off, I have to think starting pitchers are in a very scary situation here. So Alec Mills, it's not just that he doesn't K guys, but it's the opportunity cost of these other pitchers that I would want to have be it Giolito. I would much rather just play shares of Freddie Peralta in the event that it does play clean and try to target his upside. But I think because Musgrove, I hate the word safe because he is not safe. He's by far the best pitcher at his price on both sites on this slate, and I don't think it's remotely close. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
He's been underpriced. For his performance overall in the aggregate on the season, you could argue that he's been underpriced all year long. But he's definitely has not been pitching at the level that we saw earlier in the year from him. I think against this Marlins lineup, though, yeah, he's the best pitcher in the best spot for price. The ownership is it's a giant pain in the ass because you're riding with half the field or more probably. If this is not approaching 60% with the Peralta most likely coming off the board for people, that's going to be a big, big surprise. So we'll see where he comes in. But yeah, it's going to be concerning. With that in mind, is it a spot where we talked about it a little bit with the Marlins being bad? Now we know that Jazz Chisholm got left behind in Colorado, most likely going on the injured list. That just dropped a couple minutes ago. Yep. What do you think about going to any kind of realistic shares of these Marlins with essentially everybody at 1% ownership, nobody on the stack? You don't have to do much to get beyond the field, just stacking up a few lineups with them. Is that of interest for you at all, just attacking the Musgrove slate with some leverage play?
In dead lineups on DraftKings, maybe. If I've got Cincy stacks, which I know I have a lot of Cincy stacks in the 20-year, I've got 5 of them, I believe. So I've got, nearly, what is that? Quick math, 25%. There we go, Eric. Way to go. You can do it. 25% Cincy stacks. I might have to be moving off of a little bit of them here, especially because we get down to crunch time here. 30 minutes to go, middle of the 4th right now. They have 1 run. Nobody that's doing absolutely anything for Cincinnati. Everybody knew that this pitcher, Hinches, who only pitched 2 innings, may I add, it's now become a bullpen game. So Cincinnati's in deep, deep crap here. Best of luck to them in this spot. It was always going to be a bullpen game, but it was Cincinnati. Some of these bats were just, they seemed like just what a trap spot. It's fine. I probably should have been analyzing that a little bit closer, but I digress, wanting to focus on this. I'm going to quit saying digress today as well.
Yeah, that was only like our 5th or 6th digress, but we keep making all these digressions and getting off on tangents and stuff. So you
got to start being nice to me here. Actually, you know what?
I was taking the blame for the digressions.
Oh, okay.
I was saying it's my fault that you have to.
There we go. I will let you take the blame on this, but something that I would be remiss. How about that? Who says remiss? There's somebody else that says remiss all the time. Probably me.
I say it a fair amount of the time.
Okay, you do. Jordan's thinking, he's like, this is a great conversation. I have a much better conversation for you, and that is Jock Market. They are the sponsor today of the Live Before Lock show, and they are a lot of fun. I'm telling you, Jock Market is a blast to go on and play. They've turned daily fantasy into the stock exchange. If you enjoy stocks, you're going to love this product. You're just going to. It's a blast to be able to buy and sell shares of players while games are going on. Every minute, every second, in fact. You can basically see somebody hit a home run, and if you can snatch shares of them in the moment right then, you've got yourself some massive leverage. So I'm telling you right now, those are the kind of things you need to be looking for on Jock Market. There are such great buy opportunities if you're just paying attention, if you're on your phone. And if you're watching this show right now, I have a feeling most of you, all 466 we currently have in here, are a little bit more diligent than the average person. So I think being able to watch and kind of see what's happening over on Jock Market gives you such an edge. You're going to be able to, in real time, buy these shares, sell these shares. If somebody gets hurt, be able to try to unload them really quick. There are opportunities that exist like that. You can put them in the buy stocks. It's such a blast. They have it available for MLB. When NBA, NHL, and NFL all get here, they'll have it available for that too. And then the PGA, the Wyndham Championship this weekend. Going to be a really fun tournament in North Carolina. You're going to want to check that out too. And it was a blast for this WGC event to play over on Jock Market. So definitely take a look at that over there. Use promo code Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. AWESEMO. That gets you $50 on your first deposit. Thank you so much to them for their sponsorship. I cannot possibly recommend them enough. They're an absolute blast and really good money-making opportunity right now over there. Let's go to stacks. Let's just do stacks. Kind of talked a little bit in passing about a couple of these teams. The White Sox over on FanDuel coming in with around 29% ownership here. Milwaukee, 25%. As I said, I expect that to come in a little bit lower. I think most people playing DFS right now expect, I just refreshed. It did come down 18.4% for Milwaukee. It's almost like I'm predicting the future. Or wait, no, that's their top stack potential. 22% here for the Yankees, 25% Milwaukee, 27% White Sox. All right. Only the Yankees coming in with positive leverage. That's really surprising to me, but that kind of tells you that their lineup is garbage. And most of the guys that you're going to get to, Stanton, Judge, Gallo, are going to be very owned. So I'm interested to see how that breaks down. But amongst these top three, who is really sticking out for you on the blue site, Terry?
So it looks like most of my shares they're splitting between Chicago and New York at the top. And then I'm spreading to a little bit on some of the one of the teams that I mentioned in San Diego. And then it looks like I'm getting a little bit of Kansas City popping up in here. But I mean, since it's such a short slate, I'm going to have a little bit of everybody. And I'll throw the Twins into that same group. All of those teams are coming up around the same amount. Then I'm getting to less Miami. And I've basically got Milwaukee and Chicago off the board right now. I've got a few grab in case of emergency, or like if I want to throw in some shares late, or if we get some kind of news, I can grab them. It's awesome in there. But just given the ownership that was on the Brewers already, given the fact that I didn't want to get to the Cubs already, I just kind of don't want to tangle with that game with all the weather and everything there. So I'm just throwing all my shares at these other handful of teams. So I'm getting obviously a lot of White Sox, a lot of Yankees with the way things lie right now. I'm kind of manipulating some of the point projections to get a bit of a different spread. So we'll see where I end up. But I'm basically comfortable with just having big shares of all those teams, which I know I just named basically most of the field. But
I mean, there's only 8 teams. It's bound to happen.
Right. Yeah. It's a little difficult to make big distinctions between 37% ownership and like 41% ownership in the way that this is falling across like 50 lineups. So yeah, if I had to pick a team gun to my head, who's going to be the most productive team and an ownership vacuum, we don't care about anything else, it's probably the White Sox for me. I wrote up the White Sox this afternoon. They're doing the best in my home run model. They're going up against, they've got Bo Burrows to start the game, and then we'll see what happens coming out of that Twins bullpen. They're just getting a significant share of ownership. So I don't know how much I want to get. If you're squeezing beyond the field, you're up into like the 40s on all of these guys. They're in like half your lineups. And that's a really quick, easy way to tank all your lineups on a short slate too. But they're one of the best spots. And it's very similar with the Yankees. To your point, there's more room on the Yanks. But once you start messing around with the back end of that lineup, you're talking about guys like Andrew Velasquez. You're talking about Tyler Wade, Kyle Higashioka for all his occasional flashes of power, 6 home runs over 129 plate appearances with a 214 ISO is nice, but he's also 188, 264, 402, creating runs 18% behind the average in his opportunities. So I don't know. I don't know about the back end of the Yankees lineup. So gun to my head, I would take the White Sox side.
It is so gross. We've seen that total come down a little bit here too. It's down to around 5.4 implied runs here for the Yanks. As you said, the hard thing for me about the Yankees is looking at the top stack tool and knowing that all the ownership is going to be concentrated on those middle 4, even Brett Gardner now leading off 2.5K. I'm still not going to play him because I said this morning I refused to. So I'm a man who must draw a line somewhere, and usually it's drawing it on slap hitters who aren't very good and 10 years past their prime. That's where I draw the line. But again, he's a fine play today. He's leading off here for them against a righty, and 90 degrees wind blowing out. Maybe he can muscle one out there for old time's sake. Literally emphasis on the old. Looking at other stacks on the board here. Now we're getting into the middle section, and I think that this could get really, really fun. So I'm not very high on Kansas City. Minnesota coming in with the most positive leverage over on FanDuel. And I think that there's enough guys here. So Lucas Giolito just got completely shelled last time out. We've seen some weird stuff happen. Oh, Jose Ramirez just went yard. 8-1 Cleveland. Rip Luis Castillo. So here we go. Too. If you have shares,
help my dynasty team.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's not going to be good for you. By the way, you're not winning this week. Well, I don't know. It's baseball. Luis Castillo though, just completely dead. Change that to Hernandez plus Twins. What a great time to be alive. How do you feel about these teams? And then for me, San Diego. I think we're both on the same page there. We both like San Diego. They're coming in under 10% as a top stack potential, but also underneath 10% ownership. That kind of makes it intriguing, specifically because 1 through 8, I think every single one of them is viable.
Yeah, definitely. San Diego for me was the team that really stood out when I was writing my article this afternoon in terms of like, wow, nobody's going to be there. I chose to write up the White Sox. I threw in a paragraph just kind of about the ownership situation and mentioned the Padres specifically, and then wrote about this team in those terms before I got into writing a quick paragraph featuring the Yankees and then my full feature on the White Sox, just because, like I said, in an ownership vacuum, that situation just really stands out to me for power, for run creation upside. I love the spot for the White Sox, except that everybody's going to be there. The Padres really stand out for they're coming in at decent pricing. It's a lineup we've liked all year long. They do a lot of interesting things for MLB DFS point scoring creation with all the stolen bases that they provide, with a fair amount of power in that lineup, with a lot of guys with decent hit tools in that lineup and on base skills. So they just generate a ton of runs. They're going up against Zach Thompson, who we talked about earlier, league average is kind of a guy right now, and probably on a downward trajectory from where we saw him start. So I just really like the opportunity to get to some low on Padres. And it just kind of plays with a theme that we've talked about all season long. Is just when good teams, lineups that we know are filled with talented hitters, are going under-owned, it's a great time to get to them. And I almost don't care what the pricing is in that situation a lot of the time. And I think that in this specific spot, we get the benefit of the fact that the Padres are really fairly priced. On the FanDuel slate, you've got only Manny Machado at 4,000, and the next highest price guy, Jake Cronenworth, at 37. Everybody else significantly below that. They're easy to roster. So I really like that spot. Then on the other side, I do like the Twins in terms of their power upside. I just think if I'm choosing between Twins and Royals, and I mentioned I'll have a good amount of both of them in my small 50 lineup block. I just think if we're going to one of those teams for ownership, trying to claw back a little bit of a play against the field, and they project out somewhat similarly to me, they look like somewhat similar teams these days after no Nelson Cruz in that Twins lineup, I'll just take the team going up against the guy that I think is not quite as good a pitcher as the other guy. So for me, it lands on the Royals going up against Taillon. I think more of Lucas Giolito as an upside pitcher, better strikeout rate, just kind of a better pitcher in general. I know he's had his issues this year. I know he has some issues for power. So the Twins could absolutely get there. And it will lead to me having some of the Twins bats, some of the lower owned guys, specifically a guy like Miguel Sano has a very nice mark in my home run model, only coming off at under 2.5% ownership. Max Kepler up at the top as a lefty bat going up against Giolito. I love his power there. He's going to be around 10% owned, but I'll definitely have some shares of that. I just kind of prefer attacking the pitcher that I think less of. I think if I'm making that decision, if I could only have one of those teams, I will have both of them.
I love it. I'm right there with you on pretty much everything that you said. Padres, big fan of. I think Minnesota, just if you're trying to get different here, we just saw Giolito get lit up, and that's a terrible thing to say. Oh, what we just saw is an occurrence. But with all of the rule changes, I think they've had enough time to adjust, and we've seen some massive upside games. I mean, up against Houston here, 39 fantasy points for Lucas Giolito, but still an ERA close to 4, 1.15 whip. Still somebody that I think it wouldn't shock me if we saw him get lit up. Now, 3 home runs like he gave up against KC, back-to-back outings there as well. Just didn't have his best stuff. He could definitely mow down a lot of these Twins, but I think that it's a better lineup than probably. There's just a lot of young prospects. We don't know what they're going to be here. And I think that there's definitely an opportunity for power for a couple of these guys, especially the guys that we do know in Polanco, in Kepler. I think that they're both pretty solid major league hitters. Don't mind taking them up against Giolito in this spot. So both of those teams, big fan of. Kind of rounding out the rest of this. I mean, I'm looking at this ownership share on the top end. Has anything changed for you? For me, I'm just going to be hitting eject on Milwaukee and the Cubs. It seems like a little bit of a headache. I do not want myself. I just don't want to get involved here anymore. I understand there's only 4 games on this slate, and taking one off incurs a lot of risk here, but it just doesn't feel like something that I want to be dealing with on this slate. How about you?
Yeah, like I said before, the Brewers are a team I haven't really gotten to through most of the season anyway. And it's one of those situations where a team that I don't like going to anyway, when they're heavily owned, which they were projected for all day long, it just puts them completely out of play for me. And I wasn't really considering them anyway. The idea that they'd be coming back to the field a little bit less owned would potentially make them somewhat interesting going up against Alec Mills, who we talked about, and all the reasons that you can attack him. But just given the rain, given the risk of that, it's not appealing to me to just suddenly decide I'm going to go to a spot that I wasn't really planning on going to all day. And then the Cubs against Freddie Peralta, I had no interest in whatsoever. Very diminished Cubs lineup, ton of strikeouts in that lineup, going against one of the guys who's, I guess at this point, we have to call him one of the league's best pitchers. He's been dominant all season long, 34.5% strikeout rate, 3.66% xFIP, 3.66 xFIP, 0.89 whip, 14.2% induced swinging strikes, just absolutely dominating. So I didn't want the Cubs anyway. The one thing that I'm potentially going to have to wrestle with that's still sitting in some of these lineups, I think, is a little bit of Freddie Peralta ownership, which is going to be the shame to sacrifice. That's the big thing to take out of your lineups that was like, damn, I would have liked to have played that spot. But I think even that I'm going to have to pull at this point.
I mean, at least it's delayed right now. So if you did get him to play, it's a clean window. But my problem is that I think even if he's 15, 20% owned, which I think is feasible in this spot, that's a risk that I'd rather have the field take in having them sync with it, have my rake paid for the day. If it is kind of, God, it's just a freaky situation because he could absolutely break the slate. But I think the opportunity to get to some Giolito and getting to some Musgrove and Hernandez, somebody that I'm willing to be taking some shots on, Tyon even for sure in the pool. I got to think that those getting 4 of them as opposed to just saying, oh, well, Freddie Peralta, I mean, he's so good though. Freddie Peralta is just ridiculous. So it's such a ridiculous K rate too, to be giving up here on this slate, 34.5%. You look at some of these other guys, it just doesn't compare. So I really do hate giving it up, but I think that that's going to be the sacrifice, and I'm going to be willing to kind of take it just in the event that it ends up getting called. I'll let everybody else take those GPP shots on him. And, if he puts up 35 against the Cubs, it would not surprise me, and I move on to tomorrow. So that's just kind of where I'm at with that. Let's see. Is there anything else you want to talk about with stacks before we move along?
Just to round up the Peralta point, you're also talking about a team that's happy to go to its bullpen, has a pretty good bullpen, has a number of guys in that bullpen. I know Josh Hader's not there this week with his COVID diagnosis and everything, but they've got multiple guys in that pen that can give you a couple of innings at a time. So they're not really going to worry if they have to short start Peralta here. If they play in a delay, there's always even the chance that they might just say, hey, screw it, we'll push Freddie to tomorrow, get a full start out of him, and we'll just start tonight as a bullpen game if it's going to start around 10 p.m. or something like that. So it's just, to your point, it's a spot where I really don't want to mess with it. I'd rather let the field have him. So I think I had him at like 10% right now, and I think I'm just going to make the final change and just kind of take him out here. So I think I'm going same direction there as you, and I'll just spread it out some more Tyon and some of these under-owned guys.
It's just ridiculous because I do.
He's my highest projected pitcher by like 10 points. I mean,
me too.
It sucks to take him off, but
yeah, it does. But again, he's not going to be unowned. And if you were going to be like 5%, if I thought everybody was going to just immediately jump ship, that'd be one thing. But I guarantee you still get some ownership. So I think if we're talking 45% PPD risk or 35% PPD risk, even either one of those, and you're going to get 20, 25% ownership on Freddie, I'm happy to hit it eject. I think that it outweighs the times that he ends up going off and burning me completely in this spot. And he does have to probably put up 25 plus either way. And I think he probably does that a majority of the time going up against this Cubs offense, but wind blowing out, bad situation here. I'm happy to hit eject. I know it seems counterintuitive because in GPPs, I'm more inclined to embrace weather risk, but on a short slate like this, where I think you'll still come in with some ownership, I'm going to just pass. That's the decision I'm making. If I was just making a face, it's because I changed his projection to a 0, and somehow his share went from. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, sorry. I've got a place where I can change a projection, and then. But if I put a 0 in, I guess it defaults to his original projection, which I didn't realize. So it moved him from 10% to suddenly 32%, and I was just going the wrong direction there. So that's why I was making faces. If that's oops, no, it's fine. I was literally thinking nothing of it. You're just fine. All right, well that's pretty much all it for stacks. We'll round everything out with our home run calls here. Let's also talk Awesemo Plus though, because this is the best site that you could possibly be subscribed to. If you want the best data and tools and also some friendly faces over here in the Slack chat, well, you can see our faces. We can't see yours. That's really beside the point. Check out Awesemo Plus Weekly Pass for $29.95 right now. Full access to our Awesemo Plus tools, player projections, ownership projections, premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and so much more. Awesemo Plus Platinum right now. MLB live before lock. All caps, one word, 25% off for Awesemo Plus Platinum right now. Take advantage of that. If you're a first-time user, this is your entry to get in the door there. Take 25% off of that for the first month. It is the best deal that exists here on the web. Check it out right now. $15.95 if you want to just do the MLB DFS. But considering the amount of success we've had in preseason NFL and MMA, whether it was Awesemo, Alex Baker himself taking down another 100K plus W in MMA in the main event last time, on Saturday it was. I mean, it's just ridiculous how these tools work, and they work for everybody. I mean, the same tools that they're using, you can be using right now for under $30. And yeah, as I said, 25% off right now. So be checking it out here. That's Awesemo Plus. So subscribe quick, stop guessing, start winning. Subscribe to it now. I'm checking out the radar here as we're going through. We just got an update from Loco again in the chat. He said lengthy delay if they play 45% PPD, 55% they play. So more than 50% chance that they play. Does that change anything for you whatsoever as I'm looking at this? Again, it's one of the DFS meteorologists that exists on the Twitter sphere here. Loco just pinning them there in chat. Thank you so much, my dude, for keeping us apprised of everything. But I'm still thinking I'm fading 45% PPD risk. I just can't do it here on this slate. I think that there's enough other places to go.
Yeah, going by the both sidesing of that call that we get in that tweet, I can guess whose it was. Not my favorite DFS weatherman, typically not willing to take a stand or not all that accurate all the time.
It's not Schmesh and Schmoth, I will tell you that.
Yeah, no, yeah. So, but for me,
fine.
He's all right. It is fine. But for me, it's just not
every
a reason.
DFS weatherman has cost us money at some point of time. Like that's just
kind
of the way that it is. It's impossible to avoid the landmine every time. You're going to get hit by it here or there. So,
and look, predicting the weather is like predicting, these home runs or how these pitchers are going to do. Like it's the same kind of a gamble that those guys are taking. I just want to stand, man. Just make a stand. If you're going to predict the weather, tell me one way or the other. So that guy in particular tends to both sides things a lot. But hey, look, regardless, it's tough to figure out and it's tough to make a call like that. And maybe that's as honest, just giving it straight down the middle. It's tough. That is not a compelling reason for me to suddenly go back to Freddie Peralta or go back to any of those Brewers bats or anything. Just particularly if we were saying before, 20-ish% of the field's still going to be on Peralta, I was coming in like around 10%. So if half the field on that level doesn't do anything for me, doesn't give me any kind of advantage, I gain more advantage by going to the other guys anyway. And then if more of the field is going to start going back to that game, then I'm going to want to be going in the opposite direction. So again, for a spot that outside of Peralta, I didn't really want to be on anyway, I'm just going to leave it out. So I'm just I think I'm content with where my shares are coming down right now in this last sort here. So I think I'm just going to pop them in and be good with it at this point.
Right there with you. I'll keep you guys apprised. I'm got all my weather sources up, kind of going back and forth, cycling everything. So if it looks like I'm just not paying attention, that is literally what I am doing here, trying to get my own lineups in and trying to adjust everything, taking those guys out. Jordan Klein. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool story, bro. Thanks so much for your love and affection towards me. Let's see. Ramos still sitting at 18. That's good. That's not completely ruining my life. I'm okay with that. I've got so much of this 2 and 3 man combo of Rosario, Ramirez, Reyes. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do on DK, and I have to hand edit a couple of these just to get out some of the Milwaukee stacks that I did have. That was not an enjoyable experience. I don't wish that upon anybody. But as I said, they are starting a delay. I'm going to just kind of stay off of it here. I'm staying away, and I understand if you want to be playing it, they'll come in much, much lower owned here. See if we got any update to the top stacks tool as well as we're talking here. Yeah, Milwaukee's still around 25%. I would be shocked on FanDuel if they ended up at 25% with a late start here. So yeah, maybe have a stack or two. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll make sure I keep a stack or two in the $4 on FanDuel just in the event, have all the lefties, and Alec Mills is not good at pitching. So there's that.
There was a point during the day when I was writing my article that I was considering making Rowdy Tell as my home run call of the day. He's getting a nice little mark there. Lefty bat.
Hey, get right into the home run call. Don't jump the gun. Yeah, you want the Rowdy Tellez?
I didn't actually give the one that I gave. No, I didn't actually give the one that I made, who was fortunate to land in the starting lineup. I was happy about that. So we'll get to that. I'm just talking Brewers, man. I'm just saying, like, hey, there are compelling reasons, like you're getting at, to, maybe roster some Brewers if you want to. For me, they were over-owned to start the day. And like I said, I just don't love getting to this team in general. You're talking about a team with, it's a solid handful of guys now at the top of the lineup, top 6 hitters above average in run creation. Some decent acumen for getting on base, a little bit of power through there now. So if you're getting to like a Yelich, Adames, Narvaez, Escobar, Garcia, through the middle there. I don't mind it, but if people start jumping on it, or if the field is more owning it than we think they're going to be, I think those are the hitters that everybody's going to be on. There's just not a lot of great ways to differentiate the stacks that you're building with this team, which is the one thing. Maybe you go to Willy Adames. Maybe he pulls a little bit lighter ownership, and he's one of the more quality power bats that they've got in that lineup and has surprised on a few slates. But for me, it's just a stay away still.
LiAngelo Ball, 10 points, 5 boards, 2 steals. I don't know what to believe in anymore. Life is make-believe. Time is a construct. It's an illusion, whatever, all that good stuff. Let's see. Home run call for me. I'm going to throw out Jose Ramirez. Can I reverse engineer it? Can I go back in time? He's on the slate on DK. No, I won't be that guy. Let's do, God, I have a lot of Jose Abreu. I would want to, if I could pick somebody out of the sky to hit a homer, it would be Jose Abreu, but I won't go that far. Let's do Eric Hosmer. He won't be that owned. I think on this slate, if I'm going to be going to some Padres here, another first baseman. Those are my 2 highest owned first basemen, Abreu and Hosmer. I like Grisham. I like some of the back half of the San Diego lineup. Again, I think the front half will be higher owned. I just think that 1 through 8, that there's enough power that any one of these guys wouldn't surprise me if they ended up putting up a nice score here on DK tonight or on FanDuel for sure, where, the slate hasn't really got it started yet. But Trent Grisham, the 7-hole, and Eric Hosmer, 6-hole. I'm going to go a twofer. How about that? Home run, 6, 7. Throw them in. That's not just wishful thinking because they're in my single entry, but it's because I believe in these 2 individuals who don't hit a ton of homers to hit homers tonight. So those are my 2 home run calls for you guys. If you have any questions, do let me know here in chat. We've got 7 minutes here up until lock. We've done a pretty good job of talking for an hour about this slate that we just had everybody talk about for an hour on the previous show, and we're still standing. We're still kind of friends, even though you were a jerk to me, but we'll talk about that later after the stream.
I don't know. I feel like I've been more attacked. You're the one that's been accused of being rowdy. Like, you're coming after me this entire time. I took the blame for all your divergences and your returns and all that.
I digress.
Digressions. So, yeah, I don't know, man. That's all right. If you want to attack me for apparently attacking you, that's how it is. Fine.
Oh, I'm just because I'm Josh's dad. I'm a martyr.
I think you're just still hard to be. I think you're just still mad about the Tinkerquist thing.
Oh, maybe I'm just carrying that sadness around with me every single day, and you just don't know when I'm going to break. That I'm just holding it in. And one day I'm going to Paul George on the entire world, and it's all going to be over. No, I'm not.
I said it before the show. I actually thought Linkerbell sounded better, but everybody liked Tinkerquist. So I guess
I like Linkerbell. I'd be okay with
Linkerbell. Sounds a little better.
Tinkerquist, yeah. Linkerbell, like Linkerbell, you know what we're talking about. Tinkerquist, right. It sounds like I'm about to go down to the gas station and go sit around and do some bad things with my friends. Just whatever. Let's see. I've got. Yeah,
hey, you want to hear my home run call?
I want to hear your home run call. I thought that you gave me Rowdy Tellez already.
He's probably not even going to play. This is how much attention you've been paying when I talk. Yeah, no, he was somebody I was considering.
I'm a martyr. I'm Josh's dad. That's my bit now. Go ahead.
So my home run call was from the team that you were interested in grabbing your home run call for, but didn't. It was from the popular Chicago White Sox, but I didn't go super, super chalky. I went with Brian Goodwin. I think he's a super underrated bat. He's a guy who's never really gotten a fair shake in the league. His biggest opportunity was 400 some odd plate appearances 2 years ago with the Angels. Hit 17 home runs that season, well over 200 ISO. This season so far, he's sitting 166 plate appearances, hit 7 home runs, 211 ISO, 245, 327, 456, creates runs 17% ahead of the average. Only 34.2% hard hit rate, a 7.2% barreled ball. But I just think an underrated source of power, 2,500, hitting 6th in that lineup. Was expecting to get him later in the lineup, so I kind of like it a little bit better. Lefty going up against Bo Burrows to start. We'll see what happens later on. My home run call is Brian Goodwin.
Brian Goodwin. Didn't expect that. Let's nail up his projection here real quick. That seems like a good idea. Let's do that. All right. So now I'm invested in Brian Goodwin. If I can get my lineups in the next 4 minutes, throwing that in there. Brian Goodwin, did not expect that. Luis Robert. I absolutely love that man, by the way. But
oh God, so good.
He's just going to be stupid good. Very excited to watch him in years and years and years to come. How stacked are the White Sox in the outfield? Good Lord. You don't have playing time for Adam Engel anymore. He's just done.
This whole team. This team is loaded. They are going to be so good. And if they get, they're supposed to get Yasmani Grandal back for the playoffs with all his ability to get on base and draw walks and everything. I mean, they're going to be stacked. Such a good team. And speaking of Luis Robert, he's also at the dead minimum on FanDuel tonight, if nobody noticed. So he's going to be crazy popular. That's a mistake. FanDuel not paying very much attention when guys are coming back from injury lately and getting a lot of these guys coming back at min price for star caliber players. Robert, over 103 plate appearances earlier this season, 316, 359, 463. Only one homer, 4 stolen bases, though, creating runs 28% ahead of the average. Not bad for the minimum.
So Loco's going from Tinkerquist for the win. So he likes Tinkerquist. That's good to know. Somebody said, I need Jesus in my life. Probably that's factual. Fuck the Marlins from Loco as well. Respectfully, though, in a nice way is what he's saying. In a nice way, F the Marlins.
Did they mean you need like Jesus, like the religious guy, or did they mean like you need like a Jesus who's maybe playing in one of these games, like a Jesus Aguilar? Maybe that's what they're saying. Yeah, maybe it wasn't somebody like trying to convert you and
hey, preach, I have 5% of him. We don't want to slander Jesus. Jesus is going to go. He's the only competent hitter, I think, on this Miami team. Like maybe like the only one. He's the only guy that showed up meaningfully for me whatsoever for Miami, and he's facing a righty, so I'm not like ecstatic about it, but he's the only guy that legitimately has anything going this season. 472 expected slugging. I think that's better than the next guy by almost 100, which is just asinine to say out loud.
Yeah, a little ridiculous. I mean, the guy, look, it's a stat we don't talk about all that often because it's, kind of arbitrary and not really predictive. But the guy's 5th in the league in RBIs at 79 RBIs. He's got 20 home runs on the season. He's got a little bit of pop. So, I mean, 215 ISO, some of the things we do care about, he does all right. If there's a Miami bat to roster, especially with Jazz Chisholm not in the lineup, he's the one. I don't love the spot going up against Joe Musgrove there, but if I was taking somebody who's got the highest home run mark on my board in the Miami lineup, that would be my hitter from Miami.
All righty, everybody, start getting those lineups in. You have 2 minutes. If you're just in chat spamming, which again, a lot of people, including myself, spamming chat today, so you're more than allowed. Get those lineups in right now. Just click a couple in, fire it off. Good times. Anything that you're noticing from your lineups kind of to round this whole puppy out?
The fact that I neglected to take Jazz Chisholm out of the Miami stacks that I put in is going to be a pain after lock, but there's only a handful of them. So we'll make a couple quick switches with those. And that game starts later. So we'll worry about that later on. That's a 10 o'clock lock. So we'll fix that afterward. As far as where I had a lot of time to just sit here and kind of manipulate where the ownership shares were, at least in terms of the pitching and the stacks. So like I was expecting, I came down just really heavy Yankees, White Sox, and San Diego. I expect to be over the field on those guys. And then a pretty big swath of KC and Minnesota with a handful of Miami shares, Milwaukee and Chicago completely off the board, Chicago Cubs completely off the board for me. So it's distributed out. Some of it's going to be fairly chalky, but hopefully we'll squeeze out ahead of the field on some of the lower owned hitters in the Yankees and the White Sox lineup. I typically try and give those guys a little bit of a boost in this kind of a situation to get to more of them where we're trying to duck and dodge around the most heavily owned guys in the heavily owned slates.
Somebody said, can you say something disparaging about the Reds to give them the Lindquist bump? Apparently people just think that they should do the opposite of what I say. I'm going to guarantee you that that's going to be bad for you in the long run. You enjoy. I'm going to be wrong 4 days, and then on the 5th, I'm going to rise above. And that's generally how MLB DFS works. If you know any other better way to do it than that, let me know. But we're always trying to play the ownership game, leverage game. It is all, we're officially a lock here. Terry McBride, my God, we got through another one. You're my guy. Just let it be known that I never could be mad at you. But any final words here for the people?
At one point during the show, you called me Garth, I guess, to your Wayne, since you do all the talking. Is that what the idea is here? So you're more the host. Garth was more the sidekick. Is that what you were going for there? That's the only thing that's been like rattling around in there for me on all this time. So, but again, I guess I was attacking you during the whole show. So my apologies, my friend. You're my guy too. I have a blast doing these shows with you.
Tinkerquist world. Party on. Excellent. There we are.
Party on, Eric.
We've got nothing else the rest of the night, but we run it back tomorrow morning, starting with the strategy show, going into deeper dive, MLB Live Before Lock. We'll have a golf show in the middle of it. You guys know the drill. It's Tuesday here at Awesemo. we have content coming around the clock. We'll have a bunch of VODs, a lot of video on demands here for you as well to check out. So make sure you have subscribed. Click the subscribe button so you know when all the stuff is going live here at Awesemo. Also hit that like button on the way out because we tried our best here for you. Cover as much as we could on this 4-game/5-game slate here, depending on which site you're on. But either way, he's Terry McBride. He's the man. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm just a man. We'll see you later.
Good stuff. That was fun.